Good evening. Welcome to the special meeting, the special session on the council. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Dickey.
Here.
Vice Mayor Toles.
Here.
Councilmember Charno.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Magazine.
Here.
Councilmember LaCrone.
Here.
Councilmember Spellich.
Here.
So this is a special meeting. We're not going to be doing the call of the public, the usual public comments. If we have any questions or if there's some commissioners or others in the audience that we wanted to ask anything of, we're certainly free to do that. But we are, this is more of a work study session for us to get through some pretty good items here. As we did at the retreat, though, it will be live streamed and it will be on video. So I believe we're ready to start, Grady, if that's okay.
So, Mayor and Council, as we gave you a little bit of a preview at the council retreat and mentioned that we were going to use this particular date to go through a number of important items, such as the proposed capital improvement program for next fiscal year, as well as the proposed facilities replacement program. And then the next item, we'll get into discussion regarding the proposed revenue options and user fees. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our Public Works Director, who serves as the project manager for our capital improvement program, Justin Weldy. Justin?
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor,
Good evening.
Vice Mayor, and members of the council. This special session of the Town Council is to consider two areas of the capital improvement program. Excuse me. Review of the proposed 1920 capital improvement projects for consideration and direction, and review of future capital improvement projects within the 5-year planning horizon for consideration and direction. The first sheet that we have here is a compilation of the projects that have been completed and or canceled. If you have any questions in regards to any one of those projects, I will certainly answer your questions.
Justin, why don't you just go through, because I was talking to the mayor previously, and so I had understood that maybe you or maybe the finance director could go through each one of these that say perhaps council, because those are the ones that kind of, they probably have some questions, and some of it might be, I know it's either a grant wasn't available or fell through or some other things. So why don't you go through the listing there and just generally cover what they entail, because there's not a lot of information on the
Absolutely.
list.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say part of that motivation was in looking at the budget from 18-19 and the projected budget that's online. Some of these projects I didn't see at all, so maybe they were canceled even earlier than this, but just wanted to kind of connect the dots a little bit.
Absolutely. Project 4031, which is the first one that shows having been canceled, that was a recommendation from the previous mayor and council to possibly renovate the area directly behind the council chambers into a economic development office, and also quite possibly be used for tourism and other activities that would be readily accessible from the Avenue of the Fountains during special events and other times. The next item that shows is canceled is G1100, Economic Development, Proposition 202. I do believe, if my notes are correct, that the town did not receive that grant. The next item, which is G3204, is a little bit misleading, so I'm going to try and clear that up. This was a HISSUP grant, Highway Safety Improvement Program. The town initiated the first phases of these, which included countdown timers for our pedestrian heads at our traffic signals, and the remainder of that included the replacement of some stop signs townwide. However, there were some delays in this, and we were not able to secure the additional funding for the remaining stop sign replacement program. One of the challenges with that is that the town, not knowing whether or not this funding would be available, we purchased the signs to come into compliance and intended to use the money for reimbursement, and that was simply denied, so that went away. The next item that's shown, which is P3023, this is a Pocket Park West. This has been on the capital improvement list for quite some time. This was initially shown a park on for lack of a better description, the corner of Sunridge Drive and Desert Canyon, this would be the northeast corner, there was a small park shown to share that area with a fire station. And the town manager has given different direction on that, and we intend to present that to mayor and council.
Just to explain too, so it was tied to the fire station number 3. And in my opinion, fire station 3, if it ever happens, it will be due to the state trust land. And it would likely be located in the state trust land, and we'd work on a development agreement for the developer to pay for that. So this didn't really make a lot of sense to move forward with it.
Mayor?
Thank you, yes.
So is that the same as, I saw listed somewhere, Sunridge Park?
In the very near future, council member, that's what it will be called, and that's going to be in the future projects coming up as part of this presentation.
How many acres is that?
I do not have that acreage number in front of me right
But
now.
it would be taking the full site versus sharing it with a fire station.
That's on the future, yeah,
CIP.
and it's a lot heftier in price, right? Or cost? Mike, or, is that the one you mean, the one that's?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
The next project that was canceled is P 3026. That is the Fountain Park access improvements. I believe it was year before last, a engineering group came to the mayor and council and proposed, for lack of a better description, a very large lookout overlooking Fountain Lake and tying into the amenities of Fountain Lake with a couple of ADA accessible sidewalks and some staircases. That one was canceled as a result of the enormous cost, which was incredibly high.
It was estimated to be 800,000.
Yeah, thank you.
The next item is P 3028, so this is Four Peaks Park, Phase 2 and Phase 3. As the Director of Community Services is working forward and working with the town manager and the council, there is a new plan for that park that is being put together, some of it being implemented right now with grant funding, and the rest of it will be put forth as part of a new project. Excuse me. The next item is P 3030. That's Plaza Fountainside Courtyard Area Improvements. Stretching. That is the area directly behind Plaza Fountainside Retail. Between that and the splash pad, there was some intent to do some pavers and other improvements there, bocce courts and other things, and that project has also been scrapped, some of it for cost, and there are other minor related issues tied to that.
Thanks. And Councilman Tolis, do you have an update on that at all, Art? I know, didn't we just talk a little bit about that, or the bocce, or was
Well,
it?
thank you, Mayor. There is still interest in the community with some nonprofit organizations that want to contribute money towards that, and they have their own plans, but until such time as we move forward with some sort of capital improvement project budget for that, I think it's something we probably can't be discussing any further.
Okay. Councilman?
So I'm just curious, all these canceled projects then, or did they get moved and did they show up somewhere else, or were they just eliminated, I guess?
We'll go down the list. So for the first one canceled, that is simply canceled and not shown on any future capital lists. For the second item canceled, which is the economic development, that would require the town resubmitting an application for a grant for that. The next item, which is the G 3204, that has also expired, but the majority of that work was done with the funding that was available. The next item shown as canceled is the P 3026 Fountain Park Access Improvements. That is simply canceled due to cost and does not appear on any future projects. The next,
This normally, just if I can interrupt, so normally when we have these presentations, we're showing basically, projects are completed or they're in progress. This is very unusual, but if you recall last year when we went through the capital improvement program, it really got gutted. The council really was trying to reduce costs, try to be a little bit more sensitive, And on some of these, they try to give direction for us to seek grants whenever possible, and some of the grants came through, others didn't. And so this is very unusual. I don't remember ever having this in the past with counciled projects, but it's because of the circumstances, I think, of last year, just showing what happened last year and where we are right now.
Thank you.
So the Fountain Park access, was that also the plan that included kind of stair-stepping a sidewalk down into the
Yes.
park as well?
It was going to be a 180-degree platform, and it was going to look and be very similar to what the linear park is on the avenue. And then there was a lot of retaining walls going down below, and it was going to link up and provide a handicapped and non-handicapped access down to the park, because right now you have to kind of go down a berm.
Right, right.
But it came back very high. It was a very shocking cost, not only to staff, but to council as well.
Councilman?
Not only the cost, but the design. We didn't ask for a platform where everybody could stargaze or whatever. We asked for just one way to get from Saguaro down to the amphitheater. So it could have been just steps with a ramp for wheelchairs and so on. They came, instead of a Chevrolet, they came in with a Rolls Royce. And it was just much too expensive, and it was unanimously turned down.
The next item shown as canceled is the Four Peaks Park, and that will reappear as another project later in this presentation. The next one, which is P3030, Plaza Fountainside Courtyard, that was discussed between the mayor and the vice mayor, so I think we have an answer on that. The next item that is shown to be canceled is S6004, Guardrail Modifications. This was a HISUP grant that started in 2011, when the HISUP grant administrator made an appearance here to review the locations proposed by the town for attenuators to replace the blunt ends on our guardrails. It was discovered that those locations did not meet the minimum federal guidelines on that date, and therefore the modifications could not be made. And so we reallocated some of that money to some other projects in town, and we're able to utilize some of it, but not all of it, for traffic signal upgrades. And so when it canceled, we did use some of the funding, but we did not use it for its intended purpose. The last item on this, which is S6054, this was another HISUP grant. And this HISUP grant, we again utilized the majority of the money. And for this one, we made improvements to our traffic signals. Are there any additional questions on this sheet, canceled or completed projects?
Oh, Councilman?
This is probably not the most appropriate time to raise this, but we are addressing items that have been canceled. I recall that during the discussion of the primary property tax, we had a very, very long list of items that included mostly infrastructure. I didn't see any of that in this packet unless I missed it. And I'm wondering, we don't have to answer right this second, but I'd like to know where that list is, and have we abandoned, my recollection is, at the time, council said, we're just going to have to forget those programs or projects. We'll never be able to catch up. Grady, do you recall that?
I generally do. I believe when we came up with the number, that the $7 million, that was going to include a number of enhancements. I don't have the list in front of me, but I do remember. We can try to look for that and try to get that off to you and the rest of council.
Let me indicate why I think it's important. We're showing here a $4.5 million roughly shortfall over the next, 4 years, Craig? 5 years. I find that totally misleading. I mean, it's accurate financially, I know, but it's misleading to the citizens because they say, well, $4.5 million over 5 years, that's, not a big deal, we can do that. What they don't know about is this long list of infrastructure projects that we've abandoned for lack of funding. And so I would request that staff provide us with that, and that we find a way to publicize it. For example, If we determine that we want to increase revenue by whatever means, it will make a story in the Times. At the same time, I think we should have, even if we have to pay for it ourselves, a listing of all of the items that we are not doing and never will do because we don't have enough revenue. The public needs to understand what it means, that $4.5 million over 5 years doesn't sound like much, but we're giving up on all kinds of things that are needed.
So, Mayor, if I may just, I just recalled exactly the list that you were talking about, and that was the Facilities Replacement Fund. We were saying we needed to fund that at $1 million a year, and we've been funding it anywhere between $200,000 to about $500,000 a year. And that list is actually is that entire list, Craig, in tonight's? No. So we'll get that to you, so you can see. And I believe that was primarily what we were talking about when you mentioned that.
Well, and I think we should, when we do that, I would hope that we can talk about how we're going to get this information to the public through the press, through the quarterly, what's the newsletter we call?
Fountain Hills First.
Fountain Hills First, whatever it takes, so the public understands every side of the equation.
Good point.
Thank you.
Any additional questions?
Not on this, thanks.
The next few slides are going to be the proposed fiscal years 1920 capital improvement projects. If you have any questions for each one or any one of these projects, feel free to stop me as I'm presenting them. The first one is our miscellaneous drainage. And in the past years, we have utilized this to do small, primarily in-house projects that require a minimal amount of work. The actual photo that you see here is as a result of last fall's storms, and it broke that piece of pipe off and washed it downstream. This is Bristol Wash at Brittlebush. This area is approximately half mile west of Golden Eagle Boulevard.
To Alan's point, this particular item is a recurring $50,000 a year, so that would be kind of along that line.
The next item, and this is one of the ones that have been deferred and also changed, Councilmember Magazine. Originally, this included the installation of a considerable amount of linear footage of drainage pipe to tie in the drainage on La Montana at El Lago, drain the drainage system that is fed by the town hall, or excuse me, the library and some of the community center drainage. And instead, we've come up with a substantially less costly project to put in basically a French drain at the end of the drain here to reduce all that additional cost for the piping that will be necessary to tie it into the storm drain system that flows behind Park Place buildings. This project right here is actually a new project. Over the last couple of years, during some unusual storm events, we've had a considerable amount of water ponding on, it's kind of in the intersection of Summerhill and Eagle Mountain. And what we discovered by our research is that there was a storm drain pipe put in that runs east from the road, and it's supposed to outlet in the bottom of the driving range into a very big dry well. And we have discovered that at some time after the road was constructed, but before the golf course was constructed, that drainage structure was badly damaged. And so right now what we do is after storm events, we go up there and physically pump the water out and down. And this is a very important project in regards to highway safety.
This is a one-time?
This is a one-time. There is associated cost with maintenance of this pipe because it will need to be cleaned like all of our other ones, but that goes back into our maintenance plan and is not part of a capital project.
Councilman?
Justin, do we do some kind of an individual assessment of the severity or the importance of these individual projects. What I mean by that is, as we use up the CIP money, you know and I know that during the year, there are going to be other things to come up that we will probably need CIP money for. And I'm not suggesting that, for example, this project not be funded. I am asking, though, if we look at them in terms of, 1 to 5, 1 critical, 5 not critical, 3 can wait a year or 2. I'm trying to marry that to the CIP funding.
Understood, Councilmember. This one right here, and to answer your question, yes, we put together a relatively large list of items that we believe have some level of importance. We bring that to the town manager, and he has a chance to review all that, and then we sift through it, and then with the ones that have been selected, then we add a value to them. Oftentimes, it may take several prior to us getting it ready and bringing it to the mayor and council based on the priorities. And in this particular case, this one is a very high priority. This really deals with vehicle safety.
To a later point, when we talk about the environmental fee, if we had enough in the environmental fund, this would be an eligible expense for that.
The next one is a new project. This is D6057. This is the Golden Eagle Impoundment Area Improvements. Mayor and council will recall that last year we had severe flooding and damage, and this is one of the projects that we came up with. This project, based on our estimates right now, will be in 2 phases. And the first phase, and we're estimating the cost because we do not yet have our report back from the engineer, nor do we have a cost estimate. And so, since it's a 2-year project, we will likely come back to the mayor and council with the full report and the cost estimates and ask for direction and provide information to the mayor and council in regards to what we need to do now and what we can do next year, or if the cost is much higher than the proposed 2 years, we may have to spread it out for additional years beyond that. But right now, we have it for this year and next.
Justin, if you can just kind of explain, so is this the ponding that we have in front of the dam that we have issues with right now, or?
This first phase right here will identify improvements to the drainage structures under Golden Eagle Boulevard and leading to Golden Eagle Boulevard, and the entire, I think it's approximately 7 square miles of drainage area west of Golden Eagle Park that drain into this. What we will be asking them to do or give us a report on in the first one is how can we make improvements to the 3 primary drainage channels that drain into this park and to the dam, and what changes can we make to the dam to allow more water to flow freely. Some of them that staff is recommending are sediment drop basins, some flood walls along the fencing of the ballpark to keep the water from entering it during a particular storm, say a 10 or 15 or 20, and also additional changes to the size of the drainage channel that leads from the parking lot and back around to the park as well. It'll be the comprehensive study should contain a lot of elements of possible improvements for the area.
Councilwoman?
A quick question. To be clear, this is, I think you presented some of this to us before when we talked about the money to fix the park and the emergency that we had there.
That is correct.
So is this in an effort to help try to prevent what happened in October?
The phasing of this is an attempt to minimize how often this happens, and when it happens, the severity of the damage. I don't want to be misleading here. This is an impoundment area behind a lake, and we will certainly do the best we can with the funding available to minimize this. However, it is still a lake behind a dam, and we are unable to control nature or an unusual 100 or 500-year storm, and so those are very, very difficult to predict.
Councilman?
So just to clarify then, so these are for the actual physical improvements you hope to accomplish, the study is already paid for and underway, correct? So none of this money is for another study?
No, this right here is actually to implement the recommendations in the study and the approved plans provided as part of that study and the process. And this is a good question. We will be coming back to the mayor and council prior to implementing anything related to this to allow them an opportunity to review and have questions or comments regarding the final report about this area.
Councilman?
Justin, I want to raise an issue that I raised, exact same issue I raised a year ago, which is the project costs are all in round numbers, 500, 450, 30, and so on. And I know you can't do better than that when you're doing an estimate. But have you looked project by project from last year to see whether or not the cost of the projects was over or under what we had discussed here as we went through the capital improvement program?
Absolutely, Councilmember Magazine, we have.
Could we get that information?
We can certainly provide that.
I'd just like to see how close we're coming, whether we had money left over, or we didn't have enough. Now, obviously, with the $800,000, $600,000 for the park, it's going to skew the whole thing. But I'm looking project by project.
What you're asking for is a list of this year's projects, which we're still in, which is 1819, the estimated cost or the approved cost as part of the CIP and the actual cost when completed.
Yes.
Absolutely. We will provide that to the mayor
I
and
think it'd be
council.
instructive. Thank you.
Yes, obviously, this could also use the environmental fee fund, and I also wondered, so this is like a floodplain, right? Maricopa County makes you think in terms of grants or MAG or any kind of relief like that. Are you aware of any way that anything we could apply for? Maybe Aaron or anybody else that would have any familiarity with that at all?
I may be able to answer your question, Mayor. The flood control district does not provide relief in an impoundment / lake. So anything that they would do would be to help us get the water through the dam, because the dam itself is the actual critical structure in their opinion. And so in the past, we have received grants to raise the level of the dam, increase the spillway length of the dam, and also add an additional drainage structure through the dam. So their primary concern in regards to this particular area would be the dam itself, because the impoundment area is the floodplain.
And just to help me, why is it called an impoundment area?
It's intended to hold water until it drains through the dam.
Okay. Sounds
Justin,
like a car impound.
did we get any reports or any incidents at any of the other dams in town? Was the flow any significant anywhere else, or was this kind of the brunt of it?
Councilmember, our initial assessment after these events was that we had debris on all of the dams. And so we worked with our contractor and town staff to remove debris from the face or the drainage inlet on all of the dams that the town is responsible for maintaining and inspecting.
But to the council member's point, the dams all did what they were supposed to do and intended to do. This one's a little bit unusual because we had a lot of park infrastructure that was right in the middle of basically a large flood control area. So, and I do believe that the temporary improvements that were made were great, and I think that those helped when we continue to get rain during the season. And this study that is going on right now looked at also those improvements, correct? And we'll be looking at what will be necessary to make those more permanent than what they are now.
Correct. Any additional questions on this project? The next project has actually been a CIP project. I think this will be its third year, and it has been deferred as a result of cost. During these years of discussion, it was brought up by a council member, a few council members, that we should consider replacing this concrete with brick. And it would be very similar to the adjacent event circle or something similar to the linear park on the Avenue with the Fountains. So as opposed to replacing the damaged concrete with concrete, consider using pavers. And the town staff has no objections to that if that is the direction that the mayor and council would like to go.
Anything to say about that, Dennis? No? Okay.
Well,
Councilman?
Well, just that pavers are a heck of a lot more expensive than concrete, correct?
No,
No?
pavers are less money than concrete,
Really?
yes.
Let's do it. Yeah, right.
Is that the direction? Pursue the pavers?
So is it the whole circle or just the parts that are damaged? Is it gonna be hopscotching around with the pavers or?
When this was originally assessed, it was just a few panels that were buckled. Most likely now it would need to be the entire outer circle would be pavers, and there's some additional concrete fronting the library that's not considered part of the outer circle. And on the approach to the library from the community garden, those concrete sections will need to be replaced with concrete in kind because those are the approaches. So we're referencing the outer circle. So the inner circle, for the purpose of this conversation, is the library event circle inside that's already pavers. The outer circle is the next ring, and then there are elements attached to that outside of that. So this is just the outer ring or outer circle.
So the 150 will cover the entire outer circle with pavers?
I'm not sure I understood your question.
Well, we have 150,000 budgeted for this particular project, so that would cover the entire outer circle?
Based on our estimates, and it's kind of a fluid, we would certainly need to go and solicit for costing to replace it with pavers. The real cost is the removal of the existing and dealing with the existing trees and the tree roots. The next one is a new project. This is at the street department. This is a proposal to build a sign shop building. Currently, all of the sign materials, all of our signs and all of our hardware, our counting tubes and other things that we use for traffic calming measures are stored in 5 shipping containers. They have been stored in those shipping containers based on research for the last 20 years. The shipping containers are starting to deteriorate. We do have a masonry building on site. That masonry building is the fleet vehicle building, and it is relatively large. It has one lift that lifts the whole vehicle and allows us to work on it through a rail system. The second lift in the building allows us to lift the vehicle, for lack of a better description, with like 2 forklifts. And then the final bay is where we work on vehicles that do not need to be lifted, so we have that clear and safe area to work behind it. We had looked at moving our sign shop into the fleet maintenance building, and it's just not practical because we need that additional space to do other work that doesn't require a lift.
So, excuse me, so this was not on the capital improvement fund at any time in the past, right?
No, this is a new project.
All right.
And also, the intent is that we have some tangible items there. One of them is our decant station that we were required to purchase as part of our street sweeping that we now no longer utilize, that will, provided it's approved, we will dispose of that by auction and also sell the shipping containers at auction, and those proceeds will go back into the appropriate fund.
Justin, what's the square footage of this modular building?
The one that we are proposing is a 30 by 40. It's relatively small.
1,200?
Yes.
Do you feel like having this is going to help in any way with your ability to do the work that you do now? Just trying to, this is kind of, I don't know what I think about this, so I'm just trying to figure it out. Is there a benefit besides the fact that working in a storage unit probably isn't the best way? Do you see being able to expand what you do there by having a better facility?
Mayor, yes. This is the reason. The way the storage shipping containers are configured is you simply go in and remove the sign, and any work to assemble it or make changes or drill holes, all that occurs outside on the bed of a pickup truck. So any assembly work or any manufacturing, you have to take the equipment outside and do the work out there. We currently have our printing machine in our office. And so if you're going to make a temporary sign or one that we cannot get from a vendor quickly, then we bring the sign blank into the office building and we work on it on the break room table. We do the printing and the peeling in that area and assemble temporary signs. This will make it much more efficient, and especially when it's extremely hot or the wind is blowing or it's raining, to assemble a sign, to have it ready to go in the ground on La Montana and Avenue of the Fountains. When it's knocked down again, it's just easier for us.
Councilman?
Justin, have we looked at outsourcing this whole operation?
We have not, sir.
Well, that's not quite true. We do outsource a lot of the signs that are made.
Oh, absolutely. We do not manufacture our signs in-house. All of our signs are manufactured off-site through an intergovernmental agreement, multi-state agency, and we use Interwest Supply for that. We only make temporary or emergency signing that we might not have a spare for. All of the installation we do in-house, and if we get a HISSUP grant, Highway Safety Improvement, then we utilize that money to purchase the stock, and then the town staff installs them.
Part of the challenge sometimes is it's the lag time between when you need the sign and when you actually get the sign. So they can do the temporary signs that kind of speeds up that gap between, the temporary sign getting put up and then the permanent sign.
Absolutely. And this is referred to as the sign shop, but we will also keep all of our traffic counters in there. Right now, they are also stored in a storage facility. And so whenever we need to do a traffic count or a traffic study, we remove them from the storage unit, we bring them into the office trailer, we input the data into the machine, and then we load them into the vehicles and we take them out to the site. So it's not just going to be a sign shop, it's also going to be where we keep our traffic data and any other little projects that we have that we can do indoors.
In talking to Justin when he was justifying this, the concern I had with he's calling them the storage units, but really when you think about it, they're like those pods that you see. And there's no insulation. They, during the heat, during the summertime, they really take a toll on what's contained or stored inside. And so that's the primary purpose, in my opinion, that you want to get it into a different, more conventional type of place to store them. By the way, Justin, this building has got to be a lot bigger than a 30 by 40.
I was having some challenges finding an online
is
screenshot
huge.
showing a small one. The one that we are asking for is a single roll-up door with a single walk-in, walk-out door, and it'll have just a single restroom facility in it. And other than that, it will be shelves.
I don't know anything about making signs, but when you say a temporary sign, I'm trying to figure out a little bit about what that might look like, and is it possible for it to be like, so the sign that's in front of the fountain now when we have an event, or the one that's over by the community center that's put down with weights and things like that, would you be able to make temporary signs for events too there?
Mayor, we do not have that ability. That is actually handled through our CAD GIS operator. We simply do not have the equipment, nor are we asking for the funding to purchase the type of equipment to be able to print and manufacture those temporary signs.
So what would be an example of one that you would do?
A street name sign, like Peace Pipe. If we need that prior to ordering one, because we don't just order one sign to reduce our cost, we would put a temporary sign up there, or temporary no parking signs. We do not do temporary regulatory signs. Those are stop signs and speed limits. So we do not do temporary regulatory because they have to meet the minimum requirements established by the Federal Highway Administration. So we keep enough of them on hand to address that. And we also have temporary signposts for the regulatory signs. The other guidance signs, recreational signs that we may have to make on a temporary basis, we would manufacture those. But we do a minimal amount of manufacturing. Primarily, most of this space will be used by our inventory for the aforementioned regulatory guidance and recreational signs that we keep one or two of for replacements.
Thank you. Shucks.
The next one is a new project for this year, and this is a solar power generating system that will be constructed on parking lot structures in the town center complex to offset the cost of electricity. This had come up a few years ago, and I believe it was directly tied to cost and some possible rebates from the local electricity provider, that a decision was made not to pursue that at the time, and it's now back up before you as a recommendation or consideration.
And this is basically evaluating. This is not doing anything other than studying it, correct?
Correct. The money that's being requested right now is basically for a concept design to let us know what we would need and how much it would cost to accomplish something like this.
Councilman?
Is there any way, obviously you have to do a study to get the facts, but is there any way, based upon what other communities have done, to get some idea as to what the savings would be in electricity?
Yes, sir.
Can you fill me in?
We do not have that information tonight, but we certainly can reach out to others with something similar and see what their cost is and what the return is.
Well,
Mayor-
I guess,
I was just going to say, Mayor and Council, the reason why this has come back, I was at a Valley Metro Management Committee meeting, and Mike may have remembered this type of concept coming before the Board of Directors. But they actually had a bus storage yard where they had decided they wanted to put covers in, and they were using the power from basically what was generated to go into the facility that was there. And it was all lease arrangement. It was like a lease purchase over, I think, 25 years or so. The reason why I looked at this seriously and wanted us to maybe reconsider this is back when we were originally considering this back in 2013, the project was going to somehow put this electricity back on the grid. And SRP at that time allowed that to happen. Then SRP's board went ahead and made some changes to that. And so that pretty much kind of closed the door. Now there's all sorts of storage devices. Tesla has, like these, they're called storage walls. And basically the possibility is that we could, through solar energy, do a turnkey operation here where we lease this over a period of time. At the end of the lease period, we own it. And it could actually pay for maybe what our electricity needs are by storing perhaps during the daytime, which is usually your peak energy. We could actually have these going ahead and generating electricity for the town and use the electricity at different times when we need it. So at this point, this is only just to evaluate this, see if it's even feasible, and if it is, obviously we're going to bring this back to the council to further evaluate this.
I guess what I'm wondering is it worth spending $50,000 to study it before we actually go to other communities and really find out what their experiences have been in terms of savings?
The reason why you want to do this is you want to look at what the cost of this is. The costs have really come down in just the last 5 or 6 years with the photovoltaic technology, as well as the storage systems that you can store the electricity in. So what you might look is maybe a city might have done this 10 years ago or earlier. And the issue is, yeah, you might get some information, but it may be apples to oranges and may not be exactly the same thing. It's not to say it wouldn't be useful, but ultimately we want to know what this might cost and what the return on investment would be. And then that helps you make a decision if you want to pursue this.
And this design concept number is just a placeholder. We certainly, at this time, do not know what that cost would be, so we have to make an estimate and put in a placeholder.
Councilman?
So Justin, then, so let's say we go ahead and do this, it comes back, says, yeah, it's feasible, and this is kind of what it's gonna take, here's what it would look like, then we need to design it then, so that'd be another cost, and then there'd be construction after that, is that kind of, or
It's actually
is that part of the lease?
the state has, under state contract, I believe it's about 3 to 6 different companies, and that's what Valley Metro went with. They went with one of the state contract firms. It's a turnkey. They'll do the analysis. They will tell you basically what it's going to cost to build it. They'll give you different cost options as to whether you want to own it yourself or whether you lease it. But it will be all part of, it'll be a design, build kind of process, and they'll do the whole thing. Again, that's all part of the analysis and something that the council would want to certainly evaluate thoroughly before ever going forward with this. So I know at the time, times are different, and we were looking at the excess power just going back to the grid, which would be offsetting the investment in this. So times are different, you can't do that, but there's no reason why we couldn't look at this and see if the power could also come back to the town for us to offset our costs here. Maybe there's a way to use it not only for the campus here, but maybe for, it's probably a little far away, but the fountain, we spend about $140,000 a year just on the fountain, just to power the pumps, so.
The work that we did back then, though, 2013, 2012, we did a lot here. Raymond has a lot of information. I'm going to figure that you've probably looked at all that. We were going to get the parking structures for no cost, and we were renting. You remember this. So it would have been just a tremendous exercise, boon, whatever, for the town, because we were going to rent the space. We would have had the shade for the cars, and probably even for the police cars with their equipment and all. And we worked on it for about a year. So I don't know if you've looked at those things yet, and again, it's been a while ago, so it might not be relevant, but the 50 grand looks a little bit hard to swallow, even though I think if it worked out, it would end up being a saver. That would be one of the good things that happened back then, Dennis, remember, was that we were guaranteed a certain amount of what our electricity would be for like 20 years. So it was just total win-win, but then by the time we went out for the RFP, all the incentives were gone, and nobody responded. So it wasn't that we didn't do it, but it was too late. So I'm obviously in favor of whatever we could do to save energy, but it's really hard to look at this amount and wonder if we can possibly use some of the research that we've already got, or if one of these companies that Grady was talking about would want the rest of the job, would they do this aspect of it for a lesser amount? I don't know the answer to that, but it's kind of hard to look at that when we know all the other things that we're looking at here.
Understood.
Thank you.
The next one, which is our ongoing alley paving, has been deferred for several years. And so we bring it back this year, and we would really like to see this one progress and complete the second to the last phase on this. This is part of the Resolution 2017-45 to implement projects to reduce PM10 emissions. And we have clearly completed the first 3 phases. And this one,
This was actually budgeted for this year, correct? And then we ended up sweeping this to help pay for all the improvements over at the park.
Golden
That is
So
correct.
that's why we weren't able to undertake that this year.
Okay.
Justin, is number 4 the last one then, or is there a 5th one that's not?
The 5th one is on the northern section of town by the SRP substation. It runs from Glenbrook north in the alleyway and then turns west and heads back to Fountain Hills Boulevard behind the preschool and a couple of restaurants in that area. That is the final phase.
And this is a state mandate here. We've just been taking a long time to do it.
Yes, ma'am. Any other questions for this project? The next project is the Fountain Hills Boulevard widening. We are currently underway with the design concept report. Whenever that design concept report is completed, we will have an idea of what we might need based on the report and an estimated cost to complete the project that they are proposing. Any questions?
Councilman?
If we were to go to the public for bonding approval for example, roads, could something like this be included?
Certainly can.
How does this fit in with the 300,000 that we just got from the closeout money at MAG?
The
Is
two
that a different
projects
area?
are only in the same area, but not the project. The project that the mayor is mentioning is the Fountain Hills Boulevard shoulder paving, and it's in this general area, but it's programmed for the fiscal year we are currently in. The design concept is moving forward.
Thank you.
Next.
Justin, but it's a good question, because my understanding is that the way it's been designed is that it's going to actually help reduce the cost for the boulevard widening in the future, the way that we design that, correct?
correct.
There's going to be the improvements will actually benefit when it is time to do the widening of the street.
That is correct. To dovetail onto the town manager's comments, the town engineer and myself during the review process, so the new section of the shoulder for the majority of it is going to be a structural section, or in the future, meet the requirements for a road with a minimal amount of asphalt added to the top of it. So they won't have to cut and remove and replace these new sections as part of the new widening, should it be moved forward whenever the time comes. Any additional questions for this project? The next project is another project that's been in the work for multiple years. This is a most recent proposal that was recommended by the Transportation Committee that was recently formed. And they are suggesting that we bring this to the mayor and council for consideration in the place of the project that is currently programmed for this year. A backstory on that. The former mayor and council approved a project to put that intersection on what we refer to as a diet. It includes reducing the width, some pork chops in each corner that will allow for a free right hand, and some modifications to the avenue in the median across from the post office driveway to allow for outbound post office traffic to make a left turn to westbound Avenue of the Fountains. So that project is currently programmed for this year. This is the program that we are bringing back as a recommendation for next year.
It's the same, I'm sorry, go ahead. Well, this is the same, the 600 is the same as what was in with the other plan also, the 600,000. I'm looking at the old agenda that we had with it like this, and it still says 600,000, so I just want to make that clear. Yes, sir?
I have a number of questions about the design, but I won't get into it right now. I can talk to Justin privately.
Okay. It's different from that, yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry, let's make it clear that it's different than the original agenda that came out, correct?
This is basically a roundabout that's being
Right.
recommended at this location. So this is a completely different design than what council saw the engineers present to them over a year ago.
The one we're looking at now.
Yes.
Just see, can you see my computer? So if we had printed out or anything, we might be looking at the wrong thing right now. So, but what's currently online is this design here. Dennis?
So Justin, if I may, thank you, Mayor. Justin, if I may, you've got a project cost for this roundabout at 600,000, and for the project that we voted on and approved a year ago, which is silly, is it truly a $600,000 project? Are these equals?
No, sir, they are not. I'm not sure how that number was arrived at. I don't have that sheet in front of me because I was not prepared for that tonight.
Yeah, it's the old,
It's
what
the old
was-
one.
Yeah, it was before we revised this agenda.
But Justin, more importantly, is $600,000 the real cost for putting a roundabout at that location?
To answer the town manager's question, we believe, based on recent pricing and activities in Scottsdale, that $600,000 is a reasonable cost for this. This is a smaller roundabout.
Yes,
That-
Dennis.
Thank you, Mayor. So are we going to put the original project on hold while we examine the roundabout?
Councilmember Brown, that direction comes from the mayor and council tonight.
Smart man.
I don't think we can vote on it tonight.
You actually could if you wanted. It's a special meeting.
It's a special meeting.
If you wanted to give us direction and vote on this, so this shows up in the proposed budget, it will.
Well, I certainly feel like that I would make the proposal to eliminate and not do the original proposed, let's add this lane and do this lane and put the little balls out in the middle of the street. For $600,000 and save her money and invest it wisely in a roundabout.
Is that a motion?
That's the motion.
Second.
Everything okay over there?
Well, I had a point of clarification, and I think that what we would vote on is to direct
Yeah.
staff to
Put in the budget?
move forward with putting this in the budget and putting the other project on hold. And
Okay, and then just another point of clarification, I agree with you that, so if we do that, then any of these other projects, if we want to vote on, we could vote on?
Yeah, any of them. That's,
Okay.
again, what the vote is really not voting on the project per se, but voting to give direction to staff, yay or nay on the project.
Okay,
Does that make
is there any further discussion on the motion and the second, which is just about this item right now?
Right.
Yeah, Councilman Spellich?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Maybe I slept through something. Is there an enormous amount of fatalities at this intersection or something that I don't know about? I mean, why is this happening? Because maybe I didn't see a study that showed that there was fatalities or that there was pedestrians struck. I mean, I know people are confused at that intersection, but to cost this much money, what did I miss?
Councilman Brown?
So I don't know that we've had too many fatalities. We've had people run over that survived it, but that probably has more accidents logged than any intersection in Fountain Hills.
Mayor?
Councilman?
Yeah, as members of the previous council know, I have complained about this ad infinitum. I have come so close to getting creamed at that intersection, and it happened just the other day. If you're coming north on Avenue of the Fountains, and you want to go around to the left in front of Town Hall, people west just keep coming through. And so it ends up like this. It's been a very dangerous intersection.
Madam Mayor, if I may, Councilmember Spellich, we have that information. We have the studies and the crash data that was part of the overall concept that came to the mayor and council with numerous options. This was one of those options to the previous mayor and council, and they selected another one. But indeed, we do have all of that study. And in fact, it's public record.
We'd be happy to give it to you.
For those meetings.
Because it's like, I can see you're coming in the middle of a movie, because I get it completely.
I honestly, I mean, I don't doubt what any of my fellow council members
Right.
have to say about, because they were previous members, but I mean, I'm completely confused. I have gone through there and motioned people to go or anything. I mean, I haven't been almost killed or anything, but I just,
Particularly bad during the winter season when we had the visitors here, because they just don't know what to do, and sometimes when you have rude people that don't bother stopping at all, and they run through it, it's a really bad
I
intersection.
mean,
But we'll be happy to get
I
you
would
the
just, I
data.
would like to read the study before I voted
Sure.
on it.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I was also just going to comment that I think that part of the previous discussions, in particular with this intersection, I think the number for the cost of this was much higher than $600,000 when it was originally proposed. And I believe it was about $1 million. And I think that was a shock to us, and at the time when we were looking at the expenses that we have to deal with all around these capital improvement projects, that's why we tried to scale it back dramatically. So I don't question that this intersection could use some beautification and some safety measures that would address it. I'm thinking of Hayden Road and where the Hacienda Harley-Davidson, Scottsdale Harley-Davidson, and that intersection there, they just put a roundabout down there. I think they probably have 10 times as much traffic as we do, and it seems to be working very well, and it's really beautified that entire plaza there. So something like this would be one of those like to have, don't necessarily know. I'd like to see that study too, whether we absolutely need to have it at this time.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Vice Mayor Tullis, by giving us approval tonight, what we will then do is move to the next step, which is to go back to CK Engineering, since they are familiar with all the studies, and then ask for a cost for construction and to complete the design as part of that request. And of course, that contract would come before the mayor and council for approval.
And if we're, Mayor, may I just follow up on my thought? When we're looking at the downtown area and we're looking at improvements, in my mind, as a council member and as a resident, and wanting our community to have the most beautiful downtown we can have, I just wonder whether the resources that we're trying to put forth on the downtown could be used in a different way. For instance, the Swaback plan from 10 years ago had called for a roundabout at the beginning of the avenue, which would be a solution to slowing traffic and eliminating that those traffic signs, and maybe even doing something like underground tunnel similar to what they have on Camelback Road, similar to what they did on Shea, and it would alleviate the walking across there and make it much more pedestrian friendly. So I just would like to research the whole area and just really make sure that our resources are used wisely and most efficiently, because we don't have an endless supply of funds to be doing all these projects.
Well, again, I just want to reemphasize, we had the council subcommittee meet with us, staff, to talk about pedestrian safety and traffic safety, and this was a high priority that came out of that discussion. So that was quickly added to add to the CIP, so I understand what the vice mayor is saying. And I certainly think that we should look at Saguaro as well, because if we're going to do this on one end, the bookends make a lot of sense to have it on both.
Well, if we can do both, it would be very nice, but
And again, to just go back to the safety factor of it, if we did it there and also here, we're changing it into one lane, which is very much part of what the downtown Swaback and also our general plan said, that this entire area should be an area for traffic slowing. So we may eventually be able to add some parking along there too, maybe along Saguaro, maybe along Avenue of the Fountains. That's kind of up in the air. But if you look at the general plan, you look at the Swaback downtown plan, this is very much in alignment with that. And then Councilman, probably 2012, we had a study done at this particular, as a matter of fact, it was somebody, a local person helped us along with that, who was working at ADOT. And even though, again, it's 7 years old, 6 years old, that would be something maybe if you were to get a look at also. And you probably know what I'm talking about, which is where I think that's where the $1 million amount came from. But it's very helpful to see the statistics about the accidents and things like that through there. Yes, sir.
So we have a first and a second. If I vote in the affirmative, we're voting for you to take it to the next level, to seek this construction company, is it going to cost us anything to take it to the next level, or it's simply exploratory?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Spellage, the next level is to go back to the engineering group and get a design cost that will include an estimate for construction. So yes, there is an additional cost for CK Engineering to bring to us their proposal to bring us a set of approved plans that will include an engineer's estimate to construct it. The short answer, there is a cost.
What's this study going to cost?
It's most recently, their cost for these types of things have been $3,000 or $4,000. This one will likely be a little bit more, but we most recently asked them to give us a proposal to make changes to the Avenue of the Fountains between La Montana and Saguaro to, for some traffic calming measures, including some striping, and their cost for that was $4,100 to provide a set of approved plans. For this, I don't have a cost, but we can certainly provide it, and again, that will be part of a contract that, depending on the funding level, may or may not be able to be approved by the town manager or come back to council.
Will they take 1,500?
I do not know that answer.
Yes.
Well, I think it's fair to say this intersection, while maybe there haven't been any fatalities, is probably the most complained about intersection in town, conversationally, social media, et cetera, et cetera. So something obviously does need to be done. You know, and people are going to complain about a roundabout too, including my wife, so I'm going to hear about it when I get home. But still, it's to me, it is an improvement, and pedestrian safety, I think, is another important topic we've been talking a lot about, and I think this definitely improves the pedestrian aspect of it. Slightly concerned about maybe this isn't going to stick down the road, but allowing that left-hand turn out of the post office, the upper driveway, and turning left, I just see that as kind of a conflict with traffic trying to pull in to the post office as well. So I know post office probably doesn't want all traffic to turn right, but if you have to head west on the avenue, you can go through the roundabout and head up that way. So to me, I see an issue there, but.
Yeah. I agree with that,
Yeah.
though. Are we ready to vote? Okay, we had a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Justin.
You're welcome. The next item is also has a storied history. This is S658. This is the Shea Boulevard widening, and this is a design concept report. The funding for this is $90,000 is a grant, and the CIP funding would be $40,000. A little backstory on this is MAG Prop 400 money. The design concept report will be used to determine the layout of the arterial roadway, bike lanes, sidewalks, right-of-way, and drainage requirements. A cost estimate will be provided so that the town may determine the approximate cost of the project and town funding requirements. The MAG ALCP currently shows Prop 400 funding in the amount of 2.1, and that was from fiscal years 2018 to 2021. The program calls for a 70-30 split, which in this case would make the project total just over $3 million with a town match of $1 million. The DCR will help determine a more accurate cost of the project, as the original grant application was approved in the early 2000s. The 2014 traffic count shows just under 20,000 vehicles per day for this section. As part of the Prop 400 money that we received, we currently have a balance of $2.17 million that is still in the bank for this project. And again, this is a design concept report that will explain to us what we need to do, where we need to do it, the reasons why, and the cost to accomplish those tasks. Any questions?
Guess not, thanks.
The next project is our sidewalk infill program, and this comes, this is the second year that this program has been back in the CIP. It was deferred and/or canceled for numerous years. Last year, we were able to accomplish some work. This year, we will accomplish some work. And so, based on feedback that we received from mayor and council and the residents, we have increased this by $100,000 to bring the total to $200,000, and that will allow us to accomplish more of the projects that we have. The long-term and short-term and immediate use sidewalk or pedestrian pathway plan was shared with the Transportation Committee most recently, and they had an opportunity to look at that. And I believe that we got a consensus to move forward with as much as possible over this year and next year in regards to the critical locations.
So my only comments on this is if the council wanted to supersize this and actually, we doubled it from 100,000 to 200,000. If you really want to maybe target more over the next 2 or 3 years and get more accomplished because of all the concerns we're hearing from people about pedestrian safety, your opportunity is to give us that direction tonight so we can go ahead. There is funding in the CIP fund to go ahead and supersize it. We do have a really good, favorable concrete contract that we're able to take advantage of. So if you wanted to increase that, tonight would be the time to tell us so we can make that change.
Councilman?
Justin, how do we determine which ones, where we're going to put infill? What are the criteria? And is it only for major arterials?
Councilmember Magazine, there are several different factors included in that. The majority of it is the most likely places and the places that we know we have a lot of pedestrian traffic. And we have a map that we can certainly show you, but the primary criteria we use is the number or the amount of pedestrian traffic for a certain area to get them from one commercial district to the next one or from a nearby condo complex to shopping. So there are several different criteria that we use, but primarily it's pedestrian count.
And to your point, it is mostly the arterials, but there are some collectors, major collectors that would also be included, but most of it is for the arterials.
That's
And
correct.
we've had requests from people, we've had some handicapped individuals also approach the town and trying to identify these and make these a higher priority in some of the areas of, for instance, in the downtown area. So,
I can't see her, but I think my wife may be sitting back there in the dark. And can you tell her that it's unlikely we're going to have infill on Bainbridge as much as she might like it?
Not tonight, sir.
Part of our discussion about this pedestrian safety, obviously, and walkability, and this kind of goes with some of the intersection things that we're looking at. The MAG, Maricopa Association of Governments, part of what they look at when they're thinking of giving grants is when we do things that may improve air quality, because they look at the whole county's not in compliance, so when somebody wants to do a project that might not be that great, then they look at how they can offset that. So anything that adds to the fact that people might be out of their vehicles and walking, roundabouts, rather than stopping, is something that's a mitigating factor for air quality. So some of these projects, and as we move forward, because the sidewalk infill is a yearly thing that we'll be doing, we would certainly continue to go for grants like that. Very happy that there are some folks that were at leadership that have taken a pretty keen interest in doing this and working along with us and the league and some of these other opportunities. We're going to do our best to get grant money for any number of these projects or other projects in the future if the timing works out. So
I just shared with the council too that we observed that Paradise Valley had received a $2 million grant to do some of their infill. And so we're going to follow up with them and see exactly what grant program they used and try to go after the same money.
Thank you. Any questions?
The next project is a new one. This is one that was discussed most recently in the committee meeting, and there was discussion, and currently we have plans that show this becoming an all-way stop with the potential for an additional pedestrian passage from the east portion of the linear park to the west portion. And at the conclusion of that discussion, this was brought up for a proposal and consideration. The plan in front of you right now shows the closure of Verde River through the intersection of the avenue by simply curbing it off and making landscape and plaza improvements in that area. They're not defined or clearly shown as part of this plan. What this would do is provide the linear park with no gaps all the way from La Montana to Saguaro. It would allow for traffic movements to be right turn only and quite possibly reduce the number of accidents and situations that we have in the intersection. And again, we don't know for sure. However, this would definitely be a safety improvement for that intersection.
What, no questions? Does this surprise you?
I have a comment, I guess. I mean, this ranks up there too as a very wide and confusing intersection. So I think a four-way stop wouldn't necessarily help that. And Chamber might be concerned during the fairs or where they're going to put their big tent, but I don't think that can be worked out. And I see this as a good improvement.
Yes, sir.
Justin, if I understand what you're saying, people traveling east on Avenue of the Fountains would not be able to turn left on Verde River, correct?
Correct.
What happens when they get to Saguaro?
Prior to Saguaro, just west of Saguaro, there was a U-turn.
Oh, that would remain.
Correct.
Unless you made it a... For now. Yeah.
That would not, as part of this, would not be eliminated. It's a very narrow, very slow turning movement, and it has a pedestrian passage right through the center of it, again, as a result of it being very narrow, and it's a very slow turning movement.
That works for a U-turn, but are you at all concerned about the increase in traffic going east that has to go right now? You can't turn left. There's a no left turn.
There's certainly some concern and discussion should be had about the traffic, but I don't see it as a major impact because in this particular area, we're only adding 1,100 or 1,200 feet to their travel time. And so most of the people that utilize this downtown area would be in that area as a result of their downtown travel. So I don't see the uptick in traffic for the people that have to go all the way down and make a U-turn. They may or may not change their driving patterns and approach the northern side of Avenue of the Fountains through the Plat 208 parking or other areas in there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Should we do this or not? Anybody want to make a motion or anything like that? Or do you, what would you need from, well, I guess we can do this at the end with all of these projects,
Yeah, I mean,
right?
is there a clear consensus? I mean, it looks like there is on this, so I guess maybe at the end, just either,
Okay. Yes, sir. Vice Mayor.
I just think that it would be prudent to talk to the building owners on the avenue. We have a tremendous amount of retail space down there that currently is vacant. And I'd like to get some feedback from the Merchants Association downtown, what they feel about this and whether they feel it would adversely affect their businesses and, or whether it would make no difference. Not to say I'm opposed for it, against it, or in favor of it. I just feel that some feedback might be appropriate.
Sure. So basically, even if we said we're in favor of looking at it, that would be part of that.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is a good idea to have a public participation process where we try to just assess the business owners and what their viewpoints are on this before anything happens, but obviously it shouldn't change the council approving the project in the budget.
Thank you.
The next project is a traffic signal project. It's T5005. This is, we're requesting the cost to prepare a set of plans. So whenever the time comes, we can construct it. We have traffic studies that indicate when Adero Canyon and the Copper Wind Resort enter into their next phases, that a traffic signal will be warranted at this. The $50,000 that we're asking for right now is to have an engineer complete a set of drawings. So whenever we are ready to construct it, we already have a set of approved plans. I believe the anticipated flow is 2021 is whenever it will meet the traffic count warrants.
Well, and just to remind the council, there was a development agreement, or there is a current development agreement with Copper Wind, and the trigger is pulled only when they get to phase 3 on their development project. So if that doesn't happen, the 2021 may be pushed out.
Absolutely. But we will still have a set of approved plans for that.
Vice Mayor?
That is exactly what I was going to say.
What's the time of this? I mean, can we put this off at least for a year? And would it be ready in time then? Because it sounds like the actual need for the light might be a few years down the road.
Mayor and council have the option of deferring as often and for as long as they'd like.
I guess the,
Vice Mayor?
Mayor, thank you. I think clarification, how long does it take to get this traffic study completed, the design completed, so that if Copperwind gives us the indication they're moving forward with phase 3, that we'll know that we would like to have this all in the works so that we can put this in? What's the timing?
Vice Mayor, most likely 9 to 11 months to reach out to an engineering firm and have them complete the design. I wouldn't say much more than a year. And it all depends on the workload for the traffic engineers that would provide that insight. But most likely 9 to 11 months.
Deferral is an option. However, I would probably suggest this is really the least expensive, that it's going to be. What is a traffic light or traffic signal typically at an intersection cost?
$500,000 plus.
So we don't even have that even identified and funded. So this is something that I think once we do, we just put it on the shelf and wait until it's ready, or if there's traffic counts that demonstrate that there's a need to put this in. I understand MCO years ago gave the town money to go ahead and put in a traffic light at this location once it met warrants. And I believe that money was spent on some other traffic improvements elsewhere in the town, because it never really met those warrants.
Councilman?
So how long will this study be good for?
Indefinitely. It's not
No,
a study, it's an
I'm not
approved set
buying
of
that.
plans.
No, he's talking about the design.
Well, but will the design not change with the amount of traffic that goes up and down Palisades and in and out of Adero Canyon and up and down Palomino?
No, not in the time frame that, over the next 25 or 30 years.
Well,
We would have to increase to additional lanes and additional turning movements, which are currently not planned for that intersection.
Well, I'm not up to spending this kind of a $50,000 study and design fee until we're ready to do the project.
Understood?
That's fine.
Yeah, I agree.
Agree.
Thanks. Thank you.
You're welcome. The next one is an ongoing and is still identified as very important. We are adding video surveillance cameras to the town parks. We have been quite successful over the last 2 years implementing and installing these cameras, and this is just a continuation of that ongoing project.
Anybody? No?
Great idea.
So this is also one of those that would go on every year, well, at least
Yeah,
till
we originally
2021,
identified
yeah.
that we were going to do this and get all the parks up to speed and also this campus, but what is probably going to likely happen is the useful life of these are probably not going to be quite as long as we'd like because they're electronics that are out in the heat. But I think, at least for the next couple of years, our intent is to try to get these cameras in place. As you know, we have some issues with vandalism at some of the parks. Even at Fountain Park, we've had vandalism and theft even of some of the public art that we've had over there. So this is really to try to basically get a little bit better control and help us from a security and safety standpoint.
Do we have these at Golden Eagle now?
Yes, we do.
Yes, ma'am. We have several at Golden Eagle.
Thank you, Mayor. I just suggest that moving forward with any type of surveillance equipment, that we upgrade to the capability of the Sheriff's Department being able to access and live stream any of that video, so that they're able to, if anything happens out there, they're able to go to it right away versus not having that ability. It's well worth the money.
We'll definitely look into that for sure. And my understanding is this is all kind of saved on a video server. And, you know, if there is an incident and it didn't get caught while it was going on, we can go back for, I believe, a couple weeks and it'll still be saved. But that's certainly something we should talk to MCSO.
What the capability of live streaming, the deputies would not have to actually respond to that area. They could keep track of what's going on in that area by not having to relocate the squad car all the way there. They can
Right.
access, live stream, see if there's any activity out there, and then respond. There's no sense in a car going there when there's nothing going on.
Right.
That's why the live stream capability is imperative.
Yeah, my understanding, these are just, each one has like an IP address and they could view it on a web, a web browser.
I like the idea of live stream. I think that's great. I'd like to see it live streamed so the public can see it. You could use it for tourism. And watch the Fountain Park and watch the fountain.
I thought you were going to say to watch the dogs at Golden Eagle so we could open up the parks. Well, you never know. Thank you.
Additional questions or comments for this one?
Oh,
I
Councilman.
do. I assume, though, that this has its limits. It has a viewpoint, and it starts and stops, right?
Yes, Councilmember LaCrone, it does.
So
So
the
motion-
value is only what you can see.
It's motion activated, it's high definition, it's, it also has very ultra-low light needs, so like at night, if you don't have ambient lighting, it still can pick up imagery. Obviously, the more light, the better, but the technology's really improved over the time. It's not ultra-high definition. You don't want to really have ultra-high definition because what's going to happen with that is it takes up way too much storage space. It's 4 times the storage space, and so you don't want that. But the high definition's still very good on these.
Well, the only reason I say that is, I think it's a great idea, but in most of the crimes that I'm trying to prosecute, the crimes are usually off-screen. Just saying.
Go figure.
It's true. Those that are, the criminals are more sophisticated and look for where the cameras are.
Oh, my gosh.
The final slide we are proposing is for the improvements to Four Peaks Park. This was previously approved by the Mayor and Council and is currently underway in this fiscal year, and this will just continue those improvements. For the next couple of phases, they primarily include adding playgrounds equipment for a couple of different ages and some parking and some access areas for the park. And then there will be a future master plan for that coming forward.
Yes.
Justin, am I correct that when we discussed this several months ago, we were told it was going to cost well over $1 million to do the whole park? Is that right?
That is correct.
And so this is just the first phase?
This is part of the phase 2. So the first phase is underway right now, and that was grant funding to install a modern playground, 2 modern playgrounds in an area that is accessible, because the current playground where it's constructed and shown in this picture is not accessible and very difficult to get to. It lies between the Boys and Girls Club and the west end of the Evett School campus there. So you either have to drive down their driveway or walk a long distance around from one direction or the other. It's just not accessible. It's also quite dated and not as safe as more modern equipment.
What will Phase 2 entail?
I do not have the Phase 2 plan in front of me, and I'm certainly
I'm
not.
going to go ahead and have the Community Services Director up, because I know she and her park supervisor, or parks manager have been working on this.
Thank you. Just to give an update, Director Weldy is correct. We are in Phase 1 now. We do have installation of 2 different play spaces going in. This is in addition, so we can continue that. As he mentioned, it would include the connectivity of additional sidewalks so that there is accessibility throughout the park, so that you can get to the restrooms, you can get to other places and amenities within the park accessibly, both ADA, meeting ADA standards, as well as being able to have connectivity, whether that's riding a bike or walking the pathway or things like that. We're also hoping to complete additional playground pieces in this. We would look to potentially rehab other spaces within the park, whether that includes ball field improvements, lighting improvements, other areas within the park. The idea here would be, hopefully, is to leverage this as far as we can with whether it's match funding through additional grants, removal of some of the pieces that you see featured here, creating a safer play space there. It's as far as we can stretch the dollar each time we do this. Our current phase is actually going much further than we had anticipated. We anticipated this second wave of funding to cover our second playground. However, due to an additional grant, we were able to cover that in Phase 1. So we'll look to stretch this 335 as far as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. That goes to your other point earlier, though, about what's been deferred and, you know, 'cause this has like an additional 100,000 over the next couple of years. Thank you.
The next sheet shows the capital projects, the funding available, then the funding needing, the CIP fund contingency, HERF, downtown strategy, and grants. These are all tied into the projects that we just showed you.
So, Mayor, I was wondering if the council would be up for like a short break, if you're okay?
Sure.
Yeah,
Do you
'cause
want us
we're-
to do something with this or go into the replacement, the vehicle replacement stuff?
I was thinking this would be a really good break. There's something I wanted to just brief you on.
Okay.
So
Okay,
maybe back in 5?
take a little break.
I think it's, you know,
Mayor and Council, before we get going, wanted to let you know, we're going to try to proceed a little bit faster because we do have a lot to cover tonight, and I think the discussion to this point has been very good. So the next item we're going to cover is the vehicle replacement program and what's programmed for next year. And these are, as you're going to see, mostly equipment, but there are some vehicles as well. And I'll turn that over to Mr. Weldy.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, thank you for the break, greatly appreciated. I would like to provide some clarification on the very last item on this. It says new streets, Bros Broom, Street Sweeper B. That is not a street sweeper, that is a power broom. The request for this power broom, which does not pick up material, is simply to move bulk material to the side of the road and allow us to pick it up utilizing our equipment. Right now, we currently have to move that during and after storm events by hand because street sweepers in their current design will not pick up this thickness of material. So it's not a street sweeper, but rather a power broom.
Thank you.
And just so that the council is very clear, so our vehicle replacement program, we figure out the life cycle of all of the equipment that we have and vehicles, and we go ahead and contribute. Once the vehicle's been purchased, we contribute an equal amount over the course of its life cycle so that at the end of its life, we have money in this fund to be able to replace it with money that has been budgeted. So with that, do you want to move on to the next?
These are future capital projects. These projects are for the 2021. This is a continuation of the 2021 projects. This is the end of the 2021 projects. This is the first slide on the 21-22. You'll note as we move through these slides that several of these are long-term or multiple year in the 5-year horizon is what we're attempting to show here. This is a continuation of the 21-22. This is the 22-23 projects. This is a continuation. I would request respectively for clarification on S6059 and 6060, as these two items have come up for multiple discussions in the past.
And the council last year deferred action on these. I don't want to say deferred action, but they put them in the outer years. And so they're kind of in limbo right now. So I think it would be helpful for the council to give direction to staff as to either to remove them or to do something with them.
Councilman?
Mayor, could I suggest that we just remove from our materials F4013 and F4014? I think it's misleading to the public. We have no idea when the state land trusts are going to be developed. It could be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. I just think when we put things like this in there, it raises questions.
Well, we need to actually do that because as part of our development fee study that's going on, we have to have a basis for our development fees and what we charge. So I understand where you're coming from, but it is unfunded, and it's showing that there's not funding there to pay for this.
I'm having trouble understanding. You're telling me that we're going to discuss whether or not to fund this in the 22-23 budget?
So what I'm telling you is that we have a development fee study going on right now. We're going to be bringing that back to council. As part of what they need to have basically what a cost basis is going to be for a new fire station and what it's going to cost to equip it. And then they're going to recommend a fee basis or a development fee based on that we charge for fire. Craig, do you want to?
The current development fees that we have that were implemented August 1st, 2014, require that the money that was collected prior to those new fees as well as any of the new fees that we're collecting, have to be spent within a 10 calendar year period. So we need to spend the money, otherwise it has to be returned to, it has to be returned. It hasn't been decided how or where or to whom it gets returned, but it must be spent within 10 calendar years. So we're coming up against that deadline. So without these projects in the schedule, we wouldn't have a mechanism to spend the collected development fees.
So you
So, so as a result, we may, anything that we've collected, we can spend on studies or master plans and things of that sort, and that is determined that that's appropriate. So, I mean, I guess we could take this out. We just got to make sure that it's in the outer year, but we got to make sure that the consultant's aware that what we're anticipating it's going to cost, correct, Greg?
Yes.
So,
I'm not sure I totally understand it. I'm not going to debate it because I'm not sure, but it sounds like you're saying it has to be included even though we may not
undertake.
fund it
Undertake
for
it,
15 years.
correct.
Is that right?
Yes. If we can get a design or concept that we use the existing development fee funds for, then that would qualify.
Okay, thank you.
Well, it just seems to me to be hard to design a station when you're not exactly sure where it's going to go. And then secondly, if the state trust line doesn't happen in the next 10 years, I mean, are we going to need a fire station 3 within Fountain Hills proper or not, or not sure?
My understanding is we would not need another fire station unless the state trust land develops.
The public safety development fees don't just have to go to fire stations, right? Is there anything, I mean, it has to be related to growth,
Parks and fire.
fire or,
Parks.
right, but I mean, this particular, the public safety
A
development.
previous opinion that we had from an attorney
Right.
said that it can go to another existing development fee fund if we were not able to spend it in time. That you could, for instance, on parks, you could do that.
Spend it on parks.
But it has to be a new park. So you couldn't spend it on an existing park or infrastructure at an existing park. It has to be a brand-new park.
And would the park have to be warranted by new growth? Or could,
That's the reason, yes. It would have to be justified because the growth is requiring. But what you can do, though, you can spend it on a park master plan that identifies your park locations, and then if we have a new location identified and it's only needed because of growth, then yes.
well, excuse me, maybe at some point we would know what the trigger or threshold is for something like that, even for a neighborhood park, because we may be close, well, who knows? Thank you. Thanks.
You're welcome, Madam Mayor, members of the council, looking for clear direction on S 6059 and S 6060, please.
Councilman Brown?
If we're going to leave everything else in there, let's leave that alone too. It's 4 years out.
Well, and I understand the discussion that went with those signs. Maybe it was, at the time, the amount that was already spent, which was on the planning of them, we can argue that, but I think eventually we probably will be looking at replacing those brown signs. If there's no harm in these things being out in the future, I don't know, would we look at doing those signs sooner if we did them in a, more reasonably cost way? I don't know, but yes, go ahead.
Mayor, I voted against the wayfinding signs, but I would urge just keeping it in. Doesn't mean we have to fund it.
Okay. I think we got clear direction. Thank you.
All right.
you.
Thank you.
These projects shown here are fiscal years 23 and 24. The next one is the Facilities Replacement Program.
And let us just recall and let the council, we have some council members who weren't on at the time, but we had a facilities replacement program study that took place, I believe it was in 2014. And in 2015, they presented to the council the need for putting away money every year for major capital facilities that we have. And this is what we talked earlier about with Councilmember Magazine, having seen a list. So basically, this is the items that are due to be replaced this next fiscal year, correct?
Correct,
And with what we have funding for.
correct. We'll keep moving forward. If you have a question about any of these projects on the slide, please feel free to ask.
Mayor,
Yes, Vice Mayor.
so, thank you. So if we do these projections and we base our development fees on the requirements to raise the funds necessary to do these, could we recoup the funds that we just put into Golden Eagle Park with a future project, or development fees that were collected in the future and replace a project that we actually don't do?
So it's very difficult because there's a lot of different tests that under state law we have to comply with. So we had a question, for instance, like with Fountain Park. Our consultant is actually one of the preeminent firms that back in the 80s, when cities were starting to get into development impact fees, they have a really good background, and they helped a lot of the cities that were having all the high growth back then. We asked about, what about an existing park that we may need to have an amenity that we feel that the amenity is due to the growth? And they said that you could do that, but you couldn't have it pay for 100% of that amenity cost. So because you already have existing folks here, but you have to kind of figure out what the growth portion is and what the general population portion is, but it is possible. It's just a little tricky because it's not the black and white kind of definition we've been dealing with over the years. But what I like about this is that it does give us a lot more flexibility, to your point, Vice Mayor. But you got to still be very careful that you don't exceed or put in improvements that are really just replacement of existing infrastructure.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
So this slide and the next few ones, these aren't going to be funded by development fees, they'll be funded by other.
So,
Right.
yeah, correct.
This is a continuation of the facilities replacement for 1920. These are the items that have been deferred beyond 1920. If you have any questions about any of them,
Mayor?
please feel free to ask.
Yes, Councilman?
I had a meeting yesterday, Sister Cities Board, and they changed the time on me, and I got there early, so I had a chance to walk around the outside here a little bit, and like the library building, museum building. I don't know, to me, we just really need exterior painting out there. I know it's a big chunk of change, and I, for one, would like to see that moved up somehow. It's looking really bad out there, and those colors are kind of outdated. I know that was a discussion a year or two ago, and just personally, I'd like to see that bumped up somehow.
I agree with that. Yes, sir.
I don't agree. And this will probably create an outrage. But I think one of the problems we have is that people drive around this town and they say, what funding problem? Everything looks terrific. Everything looks great. The grass is green. We don't need anything. Why do we need any more revenue? By doing these kinds of things, I think we're sending the wrong message. What we're saying is we're going to spend $200,000 to paint the museum, library, and so on. And people are going to say, where'd you get that money? You told us you didn't have money for these kinds of things. I think it hurts us both in the short and long run in terms of dealing with the public. Later on this evening, we're going to be talking about raising revenue. And I think the two are connected. One other thing, and I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, I just want to understand. This says items deferred beyond 1920. Earlier in the meeting, I discussed that long list of other items. Does that mean that means they were not deferred, they're just not going to be done, is that correct?
So we have a plan, and it's a multi-page 11 by 17-inch document that has by year all the amount of money that all these different items are going to cost, and then a total. So the plan you were referencing at the very beginning of the meeting, that's what that is. And these are individual items that have been broken down by fiscal year. So that is.
Thank you. The idea of, I understand exactly what you're saying, but again, it goes to what we talked a little bit about at the retreat, which is you can do those things, and we had those sort of issues at the school district where it was couldn't get bonds passed or whatever, and we ended up with double sessions and things like that, and things got bad enough. But then when yours is the kid that's in 4th grade, you hate that to be the year. Well, that's the same way I feel about some of the things that we do here in town. You don't want to be the ones trying to, I guess, have a lesson or something, but I definitely understand what you're saying, but there's families and people here now for the amenities, so, you go back and forth between trying to make sure that we don't, that we keep protecting our assets. I think painting a building is protecting that asset, so, but I totally hear you.
That
Yes,
concludes
Vice
the
Mayor.
capital projects.
Yeah.
Very good.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Justin. To this conversation about what we're spending our money on and why, and the optics as to do we have money or not have money. When we're talking about taking care of our facilities and capital investments that we've made in the past versus streets and street maintenance, that's a significant difference from the spending and what the town has available. So when we're talking about $60 million shortfall in 10 years because we don't take care of our infrastructure versus spending $200,000 on a painting job that needs to be done to make sure that we don't have continued deferred maintenance on our properties, that's a what do they call, completely, apples and bananas, right? We're not talking about the same thing. So it's really educating the public, and it's more of what we've talked about. We need a public relations staff member that's going to help to educate on an ongoing basis so that we don't have these misleading statements in the public's eye, social media, things of that nature. We do have a shortfall. We do have revenue shortfall. But saving $200,000 to try to save $60 million is not going to happen. So I think that, I hope you understand what I'm saying, my point.
I do, yes. Councilman?
You're not going to like this, but people don't understand when you say, oh, it's 200,000 versus 60 million. It was $38,000 for a study of the lagoon.
Well, that's not actually true, but I know that's a good talking point.
Well, it's also the truth that people didn't understand.
Yeah.
No matter how good a project it might have been, people didn't see why we're spending the money. Same thing would go with painting these buildings, which is going to be visible to everybody. I'm not saying it isn't needed. I'm saying the public has to start to understand that we just can't do everything.
Yes, sir.
I believe that we don't need a public relations manager to set the tone for what the town should be doing or what we believe the town's direction should be. We as council members should meet with our constituents and express to them what we have, what our ideas are. To Councilman Tolus's point, I'm with you for the fact that is the idea to let the building become so dilapidated or to look so terrible that we prove to the citizens, we proved our point. See, this is what happens. I don't like that idea. But the bottom line in this whole thing is whatever tone we set for the financial challenges of this town is on the backs of every council member and the mayor and the city manager and the directors to let people know what's going on with this town. One Facebook blog or one whatever, we need to make a concerted effort to get out and talk to the public. And I believe that we should be the ones to set the message or to deliver the message, not let citizens take rumors and then those rumors just go around. So I personally make it a point to go and talk to as many people as I can. And I'm sure other council members do too. But we shouldn't leave this up to hiring someone to set the message for the council. The council should set the message.
Thank you. Let's see. Are you going to be looking for anything else from us?
No, I think that we got some really good direction on these items, so we're going to do what we can to ensure that they're in the budget. So, thank you.
Thank you. I'll take the opportunity now to say that there is no legal mandate. This is a special meeting to take public comment, but at the end, if there are people that want to say something about either one of these, the revenue or the capital part, then we can have the 3 minutes right before we end the meeting. If that's okay with you all. Okay. So we'll move on now. Who's going to take the lead on this?
Mayor and Council, I'm going to go ahead and have our Finance Director, Craig Rudolphi, come up and speak to you. You recall our retreat that we had not too long ago. We did cover our town finances and also the need for us to address revenue options, and we identified this meeting as the appropriate time to do that. Craig, if I'm not mistaken, under state law that just passed a few years ago, any new adjusted fees and some of the revenue options we might be talking about tonight would require almost like a 60-day noticing period from the time that council shows an interest in this, correct?
That is correct.
So, time is of the essence on discussing the revenue options. If we can try to get the council pinned down, tonight, that'd be great, or in the very immediate near future, because we're coming upon our budget process, and we're going to need to get this all done and wrapped up in time for finalizing the budget details. Craig, is there anything I might have missed on that?
No.
Okay. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Rudolphi.
Before I get into the PowerPoint presentation, each of you have on the dais the summary of proposed fees. These are the ones that have to be posted on the town's website, and we have to send them out through any social media channels a minimum of 60 days ahead of time. The budget will be adopted in the first meeting in June, on June 4th. So our 60-day time is getting very close. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that any council have about any of these individual fees. If not, it would be my intention that I would post this on the town's website in the next week, as well as publish the public notice.
I do want to just make one comment. During the time I have to meet with council members, on occasion, council members will share with me an idea or suggestion, and I have had a couple actually from Councilmember Spellich, and one that he offered, and I thought it was a good idea, which is in the fee schedule, is for when we have park rentals. We have people that frequently use the parks, and his thought would be that there would be a surcharge for a rental that can go into an enhancement fund so that the staff would be motivated, that they would have money over time that can make improvements to the parks. And so we did add, I believe it's a 20% surcharge, so we start building up a fund. And I explained to him that when I oversaw a theater project, we had something very similar. We had a ticket surcharge, and that money went into a replacement fund for the wear and tear items in the theater. So this is kind of along the same lines. So that is in the proposed fee schedule that is on the dais before you.
Oh, yes, Councilman?
Just a question, wondering how this ties in with a recent discussion we had and vote to hire a consultant to study all these fees and come up with recommendations and such. It seems like we're going ahead and changing some fees, whatnot. Was that idea to look ahead for next year, or
It's all about timing. So by the time that consultant comes back, we'll be pretty much wrapped up with the budget process. And so, but the information we get from the consultant will be very helpful, because we will then have the ability to make the update for next fiscal year. So we're really kind of ahead of the curve on timing on that. Unless there's something very obvious that we need to have to make a change, or mid fiscal year, we can do that. So in fact, one of the things we did talk about is maybe coming back to council, when they do the presentation and going through that 60-day notice requirement, that maybe we might make, if there's some significant alterations or recommended fee changes, that we might come back and have you guys make changes to some of these fees and maybe have them go into effect mid-fiscal year of next year.
I guess I argued for that study and it passed, a couple of votes against it, but I'm just wondering why we're changing any fees, this year in light of this anticipated study.
Well, and I will tell you, Craig, this information was provided to the consultant, correct?
Yes.
So this information that is before you is being evaluated along with our cost of service. And that's the big part that we'll be getting that we didn't have the ability to do before you tonight. And that is the consultant will be looking at what it really costs to provide the services that we have that the town provides to our residents. So, I mean, it's a fair question, and it's a chicken and the egg kind of thing, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's just, do we know overall, just rough number, how this affects the budget in terms of up or down, or is this significant changes, or since we just got this tonight?
Fees in general are less than 10% of the total budget. The fees that are being proposed would probably be, I'm just taking a wild guess, less than probably 1% of the change. So, no, they're not a significant impact on the budget.
But there are a few that are significant changes that we currently either don't have the fee, or there's some that we believe are definitely necessary, having had some experience.
Correct.
You want to give some of those examples?
As the town manager mentioned, we have this park surcharge on there. We are also recommending a new fee for solid waste haulers, an application fee, and then a fee per vehicle on an annual basis.
Sorry, I apologize, Mayor. What did you say about solid waste?
We are proposing an application fee and then an annual fee per vehicle.
So that would affect one company?
No, I believe we have 3 operating in town. We have Republic Services, which is under contract. We also have Waste Management that operates in town, and I believe there's a 3rd vendor.
So we'd be charging Republic?
Correct.
Well, this is charged to the solid waste companies.
Not Republic?
Republic would,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm sorry, I thought you said
Yeah, no,
we'd be charging the public, and I apologize. I
I
thought,
have a bit of a problem with that for this reason. I think Republic has done an absolutely fantastic job for this community. They have raised their fees just a nominal amount as compared to other communities. They give away about $10,000 a year to charities in this town. And I just don't think it's a good idea to just turn around and increase the fees to them. Just doesn't seem right to me.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. And we're also under contract, is that not correct? I mean, how can you suddenly just create a fee? You're not going to collect it anyway.
Well, that's not for me to answer.
Yeah.
ask the attorney. It's a legal question. Contract question.
So without getting into the legalities of contract law, I mean, so to the extent that the contract anticipates what you're going to charge for rates, or what the rate is going to be per pickup or per, can't even remember how it's structured now. I went through that thing for 6 months. But in any event, the fee could be considered separate and apart from the contract. You raise an interesting point, though, Vice Mayor.
Councilwoman?
I want to suggest that we,
sorry.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just sitting here and I have the same concern that Councilman Charnow has. We voted to have a study done, right? And I remember all the discussions we had because it was back and forth, and it was supposed to save us time and help us. And what if we do this tonight, post it, and the study comes back and says, none of this is high enough, you need to go higher, And what, we do it all over again for mid-fiscal year? I mean, I don't understand. It seems like we're putting the cart before the horse. And I understand that there's time limits, but aren't we kind of guessing here? And then we're going to get a study, and then we might adjust it again. Help me understand the logic.
A lot of the fees that you have, I'd say probably about 90% of the fees that are, or probably almost 95% of the fees in front of you are currently on the books right now. So we've either found just through our own assessments that they're too low, they're not realistic. I'm completely hearing what you and Councilmember Charnel said earlier about the fee study. So if you wanted to just hold off on this, I think that sounds like a good recommendation, and I would withdraw that at this point.
Yeah, I think so, especially because you're saying almost all of them are the same. We're talking 6 months. So, yeah, I'm all for that.
Otherwise, Mayor, Councilman Spellich, and I that voted against that fee study, we can allocate the $38,000 right now, and we can just take care of this ourselves.
I'm in.
So unless they're between now and the time we have our council workshop on the budget on April 23rd, if there's anything that we might have missed that's very critical, we'll let you know. But I think it's a good idea that we just not take action on these for next fiscal year until you actually see the study recommendations. So
Yeah,
we're just conditioned to do this, and you know, we hear what you're saying now.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Next.
So we're going to talk about our challenges.
Okay.
Some of this is going to sound like you've heard it before, and you have, at least once, if not twice, or 3 or 4 times. Obviously, our general fund revenues, our operating fund, is not keeping up with our operating costs. Case in point is the public safety contracts that Rural Metro increased by 3%, and the MCSO contract went up by 14%.
The dollar amount?
720,000 total. Almost 600,000 on MCSO and about 120,000 on the fire.
As Councilman Member Magazine mentioned, my projection for the operating fund only is over the next 5 years a 4.4 million cumulative shortfall. One of the big drawbacks that we've been seeing is state shared revenues. My projection for fiscal year 1920 is about still $1 million less than the amount we received in fiscal year 7 and 8. So in fiscal 7 and 8, we received 6.8 million. Next year, we are projected to receive only 5.8 million. Some of that is due to population. Our population is not increasing as quickly as surrounding communities. As our population grows but is dwarfed by others, the portion of our
Thank you.
is going to decrease. Right now, Fountain Hills is 0.4% of the state's population. One of our major revenue sources is sales tax. And as we know, sales tax is elastic, subject to fluctuations. We have made cuts in the past, outsourced as much as we think we can. Right now, that number is at 62% of the total budget is related to contractual services. We've tried our best, but I believe that the town has a structural issue. And that structural issue is a revenue problem, not an expenditure problem. In May of 18, council had referred a ballot question that regarding a primary property tax. That tax was not passed, but at the time, council thought that that was the fairest way to generate revenue for the town. So graphically, here's how I project. Doesn't come across. I probably should increase the scale a little bit to show more, but state statute requires that we balance the budget. So my tentative budget that you will be receiving next month is balanced. So 1920 is balanced, but then as we move forward, we start to see an increasing shortfall, totaling 4.4 million over that time period. So what we're trying to do is make some suggestions to council to see what can be done. This was our primary property tax that was held, election was held on May 15th. Obviously, we know it failed. Those are the numbers that we were requesting based on various dollar amounts. One thing that the council has ability to change without a vote of the residents is sales tax. We could increase sales tax rates on some or all of our tax categories. 1/10% increase would generate approximately $340,000 annually. We are currently at 2.6%. Proposition 126 was passed by the prior legislature, which pretty much indicates that there cannot be any new fees or taxes on services. That currently is being litigated, and we don't know, and I can't project what potential timeframe that would be.
Yes, Councilman?
Excuse me, would public safety be considered, fire and public safety generally be considered a service?
If I may, that's the
Please.
question that's being litigated, Councilman. The big issue that came before some of the, both proponents, I think, and opponents, at least to some respect, proponents of Prop 126 said, we're implementing this constitutional amendment that prohibits a new tax on services, but we don't have a definition of services. So we don't know.
If we were to raise our rate by 0.3% to 2.9%, we'd generate just over $1 million annually. Currently, we do have an environmental fee. Some of the statistics, 15,000 invoices, we get about a 90% collection rate. As you'll see on the next slide, we are saying that for fiscal 19-20, our environmental costs are going to be $854,000. We are not collecting that amount. We're collecting just under $500,000. In order to cover all of our environmental costs, the $36 current environmental fee would need to be raised to $62.50. These are the costs that are being funded by the environmental fee. Another opportunity is vehicle license tax. Council by resolution 2013-02 indicated that all revenues from VLT collections were designated for pavement management program. That estimate in dollar amount would be $1.1 million for next year. We are recommending that that allocation be changed so that 30% of those monies remain in the general fund, and we send 70%.
Vice Mayor?
Mayor, thank you. Sorry for interruption, but I'm looking at your stormwater environmental fee costs and the breakdowns of all of these costs. And I'm going to question, in the capital improvement project, we have a number of expenses that are associated with storm damage, drain repair, and things of that nature. Are these, is that separate than this? It looks like we have similar expenses, but coming out of different budgets.
That is correct.
Why wouldn't it all be in one budget?
We try to determine the capital improvement fund as those things that are periodic, more than normal, and don't occur on a regular basis. These items listed on this slide are those that are an ongoing annual cost that we need to perform.
Geez, I think the good way to, you said it pretty well, but I think the best way to look at it is what you have in front of you is really operating expenditures, and then the capital, the CIP that you saw earlier were, you know, any general expenditures of 50,000 or greater. And so those are considered capital, and they're capitalized expenditures.
Well, these line items here are 90,000, 170,000.
But they're operating in nature. They're not spending, you know, what was that?
Not one time.
Yeah, it's not one time. We're continuing to spend these every year, year after year. So it's not like you're not making an investment in infrastructure with these dollars.
If,
Just
just at
for
the point, though,
clarification, Mayor, it specifically says, and Grady, just clarify for me, storm damage and repair is 170. So essentially what you're saying is that every year, we can expect $170,000 roughly in expenses associated with storm damage and repairs.
And that's not, and what that really is, it's really removing a lot of sediment and removal and trees that are knocked down and that kind of stuff. It's not really like making improvements to a drainage system or anything like that.
yes.
But are these categories the same as a year ago? The same as when we started the program, the environmental fee? Aren't there a lot more items in here?
They just have gone up. The costs of these go up periodically. The one thing that's come down a little bit is the billing is actually a little bit less. Our experience with the company that's been doing the billing is a little bit less. But most of these are generally going up rather than down.
Okay, that's really not what I'm asking.
You're asking if we had these expenses back when the council approved the environmental.
Approved it, and we said we needed $600,000, and we were getting less than that. Now it's $854,000. I understand some of these costs have gone up, but have we added in things that were not in the original computation?
Greg, do you remember?
I don't recall. We probably have, just because we're smarter now and know what the environmental fund can pay for. And so we've taken some more time to itemize those, but we can go back and look at what we presented to council
Oh,
when the
yeah.
fee was adopted.
I just think we need to be precise. When we say 854,000 and it's gone up from X to Y, one of the reasons is because there are more, we're paying for more items than we used to. I just think we have to acknowledge that.
Just want to let you know that when we first discussed this, a lot of it had to do with capital funds. So we were fixing Ashbrook Wash, we were doing a lot of culvert work, and we were actually spending about $1 million a year on this. So the $500,000, $400,000 at first that we were collecting with the fee wasn't going anywhere near that. If we started putting those kind of things in here too, it would just increase that bottom line, but it's still more than what the actual fee is paying for. I don't think originally the fee paid for a salary. So just remembering what the conversation was, it was a lot of hard moving, heavy-duty jobs. Now it's more all-encompassing. So in that way, I would say, yeah, it's adding that. But would you agree, Dennis, you were there?
I totally agree. As I recall, the $35 didn't even cover half of the environmental fee at the time we passed this, but it was meant to be a little relief for the town because of all of the state requirements that were unfunded, and they just continue to add things like the ADQ stormwater permit, $5,000. Well, we got introduced to that a year ago, and you go down the list and it all makes sense, but it's just the state continues to put the burden back on our shoulders, and that's what this is actually paying for. And if I had my druthers, we would have probably have had that more at $50, not $35 at the time, and $62.50 at this point in time doesn't scare me at all. I mean, we've got to figure out some way. A good example, as best as I recall, when it comes to culvert inspection and cleaning, storm drain culvert inspection and cleaning, at $90,000 a year, we won't get all the culverts and storm drains cleaned in the next 25 years. That's how offbeat that $90,000 really is. Now, that's the way I remember this. And so, do you recall that?
Yeah,
And
that they had to
it
use
was
a
big
camera
number.
and all, yeah.
Exactly. So, we've got to figure out how to pay our bills.
Yeah, thank you.
So going back to VLT, changing the allocation would provide $331,000 to the general fund. And in anticipation of council agreeing to that, I have used that $331,000 in my projections, and that is the number that has balanced our budget.
And just to make a point, I a number of cities, when they receive their state shared revenue, VLT is one of those components of state shared revenue. It goes into the general fund and supports the general fund, and then a lot of times they'll go ahead and designate a portion of it back into like their streets program, their pavement management, just like they do with maybe the highway user revenue fund. Under state law, you can only use that for streets and related expenses.
Councilman?
So a question or two, would we need a new separate resolution then to change the percentage since it was 100% to pavement management, or is it just part of the budget?
So the way that it was written in the resolution, Craig's going to probably read it to you, but it gave council the discretion when they put this into effect to go ahead and, through a budget process, they can make that change. Now, I believe he also, go ahead.
Precise wording was in section 4, beginning in fiscal year 2013-14 and continuing annually thereafter until directed otherwise by the town council as part of its annual budget process or separately at a public meeting, all revenues received from the town's portion of vehicle license tax shall be designated for the pavement management program.
So without, obviously we have a lot more discussion ahead of us. So if we don't do this, then you have to cut 331 elsewhere out of the budget?
Yes.
And so this number was just kind of what you had left over at the end that you needed? Is that how we came up with the 70-30 or?
Through discussions with the town manager, we kind of came up with that number.
Originally, we were looking at the, if it was possible to pay off the refinancing of the community center and try to do that this year, because next year is going to be paid off, and it was around $300,000. And we learned we really couldn't do this, and in discussing that, that's where this came up as a possible idea.
And one more. I just, on the surface, we've been talking about streets forever, and that was kind of a major basis of the property tax discussion and argument for it. And just even divert 330 from it, to me, seems like, we're kind of changing priorities again. And maybe we'll come up with some other revenue, within the next 2 hours or whatever. But just on the surface, I don't know if I'm a big fan of this, but it's hard to tell,
Agree. That was the first question when we first did this, and I saw that too. But I don't know. Then you look at the other side of the coin, and I asked about, your discussions with Justin or other, where this is actually going to come from, and I think they had come to an agreement, but certainly worth discussing. Anybody else? I wanted to say back to your point about Republic Waste. When we just looked at that list of the environmental stuff, one thing that has been removed is the hazardous waste recycling, because
It's in
they're going to do that in the contract. So that was one good thing to that side. Sorry to interrupt.
We could add a solid waste admin fee that would be paid by the residents. And that would be $1 a month for each of the Republic quarterly invoices. So it'd be $3 per quarter to approximately 9,000 residential accounts. That would raise roughly $108,000 if it was paid by everyone.
Councilman.
This $1 here and $3 there and so on and so forth reminds me of trying to buy a plane ticket. You buy a plane ticket, you might pay some extra for a bigger seat, you might pay extra for luggage, to store your luggage and so on. I think there are other ways to do this, rather than nickel and diming all over the place. I'd rather the airlines told me, this is what it's going to cost you, here's your seat, and you get 2 bags. I think the residents would prefer that. I think that's something to think about.
As far as this particular one goes, I'm super sensitive about it because I know how much of an uphill battle it was to get to the where we are now. So I'd rather not do this particular one, just personally.
And Mayor, we just approved a new contract with the Republic, which resulted in, a slight increase to the residents already.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to be a messenger.
We know. Don't
Just
take
trying
anything
to give as
personally.
many options, ideas, something might spur another thought. So we're not vested in any of these, it's just, here's a laundry list of what possibly might happen.
And we appreciate it, and afterwards we'll, look at all of these together and kind of probably decide what I don't know whether we'll vote, but we'll decide what we want to do. Thank you.
Public safety fee has been discussed, of $100. That would get us 1.2 million, 600 businesses, 11,700 households. We've also estimated what it would cost if we needed to replace rural metro with a town fire department. And our best estimate at this time is an additional $450,000 annually. Annually.
Oh, yeah, we'll have to talk about that at some point, because I know we have an initial amount that we would have to come up with some of the equipment or just various items to start up. But I think that the annual amount is something that needs further investigation. I feel, well, you all know how I feel about this. I think it would be great to have if everything was in-house, then I believe that those costs would be more under our control than they are now. So, but we're not really going to make that decision, that's for sure. Thanks.
This was presented by Councilmember Spellich at our annual retreat of an infrastructure maintenance fee, $350 for residents, $400 for commercial. These are my counts for households and businesses. Of the total businesses, almost, 557 are home-based. So it would seem appropriate to charge them once as a resident and then also as a business operating out of their home.
Did you say you think?
Would not.
Would not be.
Yeah. That's what I thought too.
We all did.
Kind of like, what?
So here's numbers. I come up with a number less than Councilmember Spellich had. These numbers are assuming 100% collection rate, and I don't believe that would be realistic. And you can each have your own estimate of what a collection rate might be.
Craig and I did talk if this was something council wanted to consider, or the public safety fee or what have you. We may want to just go ahead and collect it like in the first year and just have it just held, because you just don't want to count on something not knowing what the collection rate's going to be. And it's pretty common, like the state shared revenue. State shared revenue is always a year or two in arrears, because it's based on actual collected, and then when it's distributed a year or two out. So that might be just something to keep in mind.
Other possible options, a franchise fee for EPCOR and Southwest Gas. We already discussed raising town fees.
Excuse me, Mayor,
Yes.
I don't begin to understand the implications of the EPCOR and Southwest Gas. What would we be doing there?
We would essentially be granting them a license to operate in the town.
The reason for the franchise fee is that our streets and right-of-way are all used at no cost to them. So it's like a annual business cost to kind of reimburse the town for them utilizing our assets at no cost to the companies. So most cities and towns all have franchises, and it would be something that would be referred to the voters, for the voters to actually take action on.
On this one item?
On the franchise fees. For if you had a franchise fee for EPCOR and a franchise fee for Southwest Gas, my understanding would probably be likely two separate questions on a ballot.
Franchise fees, can you repeat again?
Just that this would be something that voters would basically be referred to and actually take action on. The franchise is something that's not available for the council to do at their level.
may not have understood, do other towns do this?
Yes,
And these kinds
and
of-
not only in Arizona, but all over the country.
These kinds of amounts?
This was something that we researched, and this is not too uncommon, correct?
Correct.
It's kind of like this, most cities have what's called a cable license fee, and the cable license fee is basically like it's a 5% on the operations. It's very similar to the concept. It's just that this is a franchise fee, and this is really covered under state law versus a license agreement that we have with a cable company. So,
What about SRP?
they're considered a political subdivision, and as a governmental entity, we would not be able to assess them, correct? Correct? Yeah.
And cable too, or how does that work?
Well, cable has a cable license agreement, so the council's already granted that. It has changed. Unfortunately, I believe the legislature made a change in the law last year, and I believe that's all going to the Secretary of State, which I don't know how that agency's going to be able to manage all these license agreements throughout the state, but we'll continue, I believe, for a period of time to collect our license fees, but eventually it's going to go away,
I
right?
believe January 1st, 2020 is when it goes to the Secretary of State. And the legislation authorized all the cable companies to renegotiate their existing contracts with any other town or city.
That will be coming to the council.
Happy anniversary. Thank you.
We talked about fees and also that we are currently doing a fee study. We could possibly sell the cell towers that are on town-owned property, would be a one-time revenue. I've been approached by 2 different companies that have made proposals.
Do we collect rent on that?
We do. We collect cell tower lease rental for all, and I believe there's 4 or 5 current locations. Sell or lease excess town-owned land. I mentioned in the fee schedule that got tabled the solid waste hauler license fee. We currently have a contract with our TPT auditor to look at primarily residential rentals, or we could hire in a financial advisor to give us some other alternatives. So here's what we can do. You could approve another primary tax election, raise local sales tax, raise the environmental fee. We talked about reallocating the VLT, an admin fee for solid waste collection, public safety fee, an infrastructure maintenance fee, franchise fees, adopt new fees or raise town fees, sell town property or leases. So these are our recommendations. Raising local sales tax by 0.3% to generate approximately $1 million annually. Increase the environmental fee from $36 to $62. Reallocate the VLT, 30% to stay in the general fund and 70% to go to streets. Talked about the solid waste fee of $1 a month. And then after we receive the user fee study, take some action on adjusting town fees.
Okay. Sorry, my computer just went bizarre. All right, so, who would like to say something? Councilman?
Be more than happy to, thank you. So, looking at everything you've presented, I will give you the yeses and nos as to how I feel about it. The sales tax, I see as a yes. The environmental fee increase, I see as a yes. The vehicle license tax being swung 30/70. The town's got to pay their own bills. So I would say yes to that as well. I know we had 100% of it going to streets. We also have other bills other than the streets, so I would say yes to that. The solid waste, $1, I would say no. The infrastructure maintenance fee, I would say yes to. The franchise fee, I would say yes to. And other possibles, I would say no to.
Public safety?
Public safety, I would say yes to. I think every one of those needs a lengthy look and they all have merits to paying our way to live in Fountain Hills.
Councilman?
Councilman, do you have any idea what that would add up to?
I have no idea, but I know that what we need to do is we need to, number one, stop the bleeding, and number two, get caught up on what we have let the last 7 or 8 or 9 councils just kind of wash off their backs as we push it till next year.
Well, you and I, it turns out, singing from the same song sheet, because I agree with about everything you said.
Not all of it?
Well, I'm getting there. I think so. I don't like the idea of increasing sales tax, but I think we need to do it. It hurts the people who can least afford it. So I'm in favor of increasing that 3/10. I also think we need to look at a public safety fee. That's got problems. Everybody pays the same amount. But we've got to do some things that we don't like to do, don't want to do, and the bottom line is we have to raise revenues. I don't know how much I would have a public safety fee, but I would eliminate the environmental fee. So it depends on what the level is for the public safety fee. Follow me? Just to make it simple, and maybe people will like that a little bit, that they're not paying an environmental fee. I don't pretend to know how much we would need the public safety fee to be. $100 per parcel is 1.2 million. My guess is it would have to be higher than that to give us what we need. I'd also suggest the possibility of sunsetting it at the end of 4 years and let the new council decide whether or not to continue it, increase it, reduce it, or whatever. So I'm in favor of, I think, everything that you proposed, with the exception of the environmental fee.
And, you know, I wasn't writing fast enough. Could you repeat the ones that you said you were in favor of?
Certainly.
Okay.
The sales tax, I had a yes. The environmental fee, I had a yes. The vehicle license tax, I said, I like the idea. I don't like the idea at all, but I see the benefit of doing a 30-70 split. The solid waste $1 fee, I say no to. The infrastructure maintenance that was suggested in our, I believe that was in a retreat, wasn't it? I think that's a great idea, and I say yes to that. And I think we can put a sunset on that. We can put and yes on the franchise fee. Other possibles, I said no to. The public safety fee, I said yes to. And I think we should put a sunset clause on the, probably the infrastructure maintenance fee, for sure.
Councilman?
Councilman, why would you have both an infrastructure maintenance fee and a public safety fee? I misunderstood you the first time around. I thought you said yes to the public safety, no to the infrastructure.
No, I said yes to the infrastructure fee. I think the way that was presented at at our retreat was as close to being a real true possibility as anything that was actually rolled across the table during the retreat.
Would you, as I recall the proposal, and Councilman can correct me, would you also go along with the reduction of the amount of that fee every year?
Totally, exactly as it was presented in our retreat. I think it is. I think it's something that the citizens would like to see is an end all for any of these fees.
I agree with an end all in 4 years, but as I understand it, you're saying X amount of money, then less money, then less money, then less money for those fees.
Could I ask the author of that to throw your weight in on this, please?
The way it's written is the way I said it.
Say again, please.
The way it's written, the way that Director Rudolphi has it written, is the way that it was proposed.
Mayor,
It goes down.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you.
thank you. I'm questioning why none of the options are discussing the street bond that is going to expire on Saguaro, which was $8 million. There's been discussion with the town manager. I've had this discussion as looking at increasing that bond in the future, spreading out the payment plan so that the actual costs to the residents would not go up. So that's going to expire in 2020. If we were able to pass a new bond and we were able to take the expenses off of the budget as we stand now, right now I believe we're allocating $2 million out of the general fund on an annualized basis for street maintenance. Is that correct?
We are spending approximately $2.5 million, but
Okay.
it's not being allocated from the general fund. It's VLT money and HERF money. So there's no general fund
So we
money.
would offset some of the budgetary, the monies that we need with the bond funds that we're using outside of the budget, meaning that we can replace that bond, extend the payment structure out farther, and go to the public, rather than try to pass a fee here, we would go to the public, allow them to vote on the bond. The bond would be used for a lot of the infrastructure expenses we need, and it would offset some of the expenses in our general fund now to balance out, so we would not have to go create a tax, essentially, is what we're doing. This fee is creating a tax. We're voting in a tax that's pretty significant. Is that an option? Why aren't we discussing, we talked about paying off the bond, $300,000 left, I believe, and going potentially for another bond in the next fiscal year. Am I missing something? That's what I thought we talked about at the budget meeting.
So we did talk briefly about that, and one of the things that we're doing right now, the Public Works Director is working with IMS to assess and evaluate what possibly an $8 million bond could get us. And then we did talk about having that be stretched out instead of 5 years, maybe 10 years, which would bring down the cost of what most people are paying currently to about half. So it wasn't in this discussion because this is really, we're talking about revenues here to help, we're really bleeding on the operating budget side. And that's what all these here, except for this infrastructure maintenance fee. The maintenance fee part of it will cover like the environmental fee, as I understand it, would replace that, which is covering all the operating costs. And it would cover other things that are operating budget related, but mostly infrastructure and I believe streets.
Mayor, how much in the existing budget, if a bond package was to be passed, are we currently spending that would now be replaced with the funds from the bonds that would be paid for at the same level that the residents are paying now, if it's structured correctly? How much within the budget right now would we offset so that we would not have to raise these revenues or have shortfalls in the next 3 to 4 years?
I believe the only money that we could have would be the remaining 70% of the VLT that we could then keep in the general fund,
Which
which
is
would be
how much?
$700,000.
Annually?
Yes.
Wait, 700,000? Oh, because that's the 70%.
Combined, it's 1.1 million.
The bonding, though, that goes to a project. That does not go to the operating.
It's capital.
So it would have to be like what it was for Saguaro Boulevard. So it would, I think, to me, it would kind of look like it would go for the infrastructure maintenance fee aspect of all of these. I think coming up with projects, it's still not gonna, do the trick basically, but if we had other stuff coming in on the operational side, and then we bonded for projects, we could see a little bit more of the light of day. But to your point, I think what you're saying would go for what the solid waste, the infrastructure maintenance fee would be. That's how I see it. Anyway, that's where I see that trade-off.
You mean to replace one for the other, just substitute basically the money, is that?
Yeah, I mean, the money that this would bring in is a lot, and it goes away, so it kind of reminds me of a bond. I mean, this particular one, the infrastructure maintenance fee one. If we looked at what you said, I'd be uncomfortable with the amount, the total amount that would be for people to have to handle. That was my first impression. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I tend to agree with that sentiment. That's a big chunk to chew on. And I'll address, I guess, just now the sales tax. I mean, I would even consider looking at raising it 0.4%. That would take us up to an even 3%. Right now, there's 9 other cities in Maricopa County that have a higher individual sales tax rate than we do. So, we're going to hear, oh, we have the highest sales tax rate in the county. Well, we don't. And even at 3%, Guadalupe has 4%, but we would either tie or be below, some of them. And so that would raise, well over $1 million, and sales tax collections are, at the point of sale. I mean, that there's no, oh, I don't want to pay that. Well, you don't really. So collections are easy. That issue is taken away. And, if you go 0.4, if you get $100 of groceries at Safeway, Bashes or Fries, that's the extra 40 cents. So to me, that's not burdensome at all. And the last time the council raised the sales tax was in 2003. So 16 years ago, it went from 1.6 to 2.6, and so it's been there ever since. So that's a significant amount of time. So to me, going to 0.4 is advantageous for us. And in the realm of fees, I always was hesitant with this infrastructure maintenance fee as far as the amount up front required and just the collection rate. It just all kind of scares me when it's not mandatory per se, unlike a property tax or a bond that gets passed by voters or a sales tax. So if I'm going to look at any kind of fee increase, I think the environmental fee is doable. And to me, public safety is where a lot of our costs are going up. So if I were to consider any kind of new fee, I think it would be in that realm. But that kind of sums up my feelings right now.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. As much as, while I hear you, just because we did not increase the sales tax rate since 2003 does not mean the cost of living has stayed exactly the same. So everything has increased in regards to expenses for everyone, and the taxes we are collecting would be connected to the cost of goods. Right now, we have a tremendous issue in this town with bringing businesses to town. Retail, we have so many vacancies right now. We've talked about looking into ways that we potentially could tax or have a fee for vacancies for landlords that are keeping these properties vacant and not filling them for one reason or another. We talked about that. We brought that up for a legal opinion. There's other states that are doing it. I'd like to know if is something we can look into to collect revenues. Also, and these are discussion points. That's what we're here for tonight. Let's discuss. I think that we have to come up with more solutions than what have been presented. The town right now, in the way that we have been structured in collecting sales tax revenues, there's a disadvantage to residents of this community that are paying the sales tax revenue when you have many people, I believe over 20% of the homes in this town are secondary residence or investment properties. I'd like to know whether there's any legalities to have a fee for secondary residences that people aren't registered in Arizona. Because what's happening is when they leave for 6-7 months out of the year, the idea that we have a sales tax revenue that's a significant portion of our budget being collected, when they're not here, they're not contributing to the community and the needs of our community. And that was the justification for looking at a primary property tax, which has failed. So now to go back and vote as a council to have a fee, I feel is the same. We are taxing the people of this community. Let's try to work within our structure now and come up with solutions to raise funds. We've got to be more creative than we've discussed tonight. We've got to look at other options. Selling property that we own currently, looking at the property on Shea. 2 years we've been talking about that. In 2 years at the council retreat, if we look at the meetings, we've talked about highest and best use, looking at the zoning on properties, commercial properties, looking at whether or not there's ways we can help the businesses to be more successful in town, which will ultimately bring more sales tax revenue. We've heard all the arguments, but again, I hate to say this again, but I'll say it every meeting. It's Groundhog Day in Fountain Hills, Arizona. And as I'm listening tonight, I feel like it's an instant replay from 2 years ago. So I hope we can come up with more solutions, and I think we need legal counsel to really look at other ways that we can be looking at revenue options, the vacancies on the leases for commercial properties, whether that's an option. What could we do with the existing properties we currently have in looking at selling them, and what type of revenues would that bring in? Are there public-private partnerships we can be looking at to look at investment in our town? To bring in, for instance, on Shea, we've talked about this, having residential rentals on Shea, which is a much more appropriate, and I'm not talking Shea Palisades, I'm talking Shea Commercial, in the commercial district down near Target, where it's more appropriate to have multifamily rental properties. So we need to be a lot more creative than we have been. And sorry to be long-winded, but this is a very frustrating conversation when we constantly have the same discussion.
Councilman?
Well, it's frustrating for me too, because there isn't a thing that Vice Mayor Tallis has mentioned that we haven't discussed and looked into.
That is absolutely not the case.
Excuse me. The other thing is that selling property is a one-time affair. You get in some money, you get nothing the next year. That is not going to help us. One thing we haven't done is say, okay, how much money do we need? And then we have to work backwards. It's a zero-sum game. If you do away with sales tax, then you got to increase something else. Unless you're going to do, to me, some of these proposals are penny ante. A few bucks here, a few bucks there, one time, increasing the number of businesses to get sales. Look, we all know that we couldn't possibly increase the number of businesses in this town to offset what we need to offset in terms of our budget. It can't be done. $40 million in sales equals $1 million in sales tax. 40 million. We're at about 23 now, does that sound right?
I don't know.
Okay, it's not gonna happen. So if you need 40 million to raise 1 million, then I don't care how many more businesses you bring to town, or how many people, we're still gonna have a big financial problem. It's not gonna change. So I think we need to know what it is we need to raise, over what period of time, and then you work backwards from there. Just a comment about the infrastructure fee. I guess I don't understand how you set how much you need, but then you're reducing it every year. That just doesn't make sense to me. I would go with a public safety fee. It's over 50% of our total budget, and I think people understand that. That's easy to explain. How do you explain an infrastructure fee? And you know what, sometimes you have to do it with a bumper sticker, so people really understand. Public safety equals 50% of our budget. Something needs to be done. People can understand that. But I don't know how we get to the point where we determine how much we actually need. But that has to be, in my mind, a starting point. And it's a zero-sum game. You take away one, you got to add another one to get to that level.
Mayor,
Let Councilman Spellich.
I'll respond to Alan after
Okay.
Spellich.
Go ahead, Councilman. Yeah, he'll
Go
be
ahead.
able to.
It'll give you time to cool off. Alan, the infrastructure maintenance fee was an idea that was proposed, thought about by Jerry Friedel and I, and then proposed. And it's fluid. There was nothing set in motion. The reduction in the fee, in the twilight of the fee, I thought would bring residents more willing to accept it. The emails that I received and everything, I mean, there was some positive ones, very negative ones. I mean, if you're going to send me an email, you can't scare me. I'm married. So that ain't happening. To Councilman Vice Mayor Tolis's point, one of the emails that I got, some person said, start thinking like a businessman, jackass. So I did that. And what I came up with was, let's collect, and I think all my fellow council members will agree, let's collect what's already owed to the town, what people already owe us. So as it relates to the environmental fee, there's a balance of $126,000 that has not been collected. In 2016, 1,455 people didn't pay. In 2017, 1,044 people didn't pay. And in 2018, 1,000 people haven't paid, for a grand total of $126,000 that's owed to us. One property owner alone owes us $9,000. So that's a significant amount of money. As it relates to the environmental fee not being collected, I propose the following. I propose that a 30-day notice be sent and put in the newspaper as well as advertised on the town website to let people know that they have 30 days to bring their account current. If in the 30 days, that 30 days passes, we then publicize in the newspaper as well as online all the people that have not paid this fee. Public shaming, yes, it works. So I'm 100% for it. Secondly, on top of the $126,000 that's owed to the town, there's an outstanding balance of court fees that are owed. The balance of court fees that are owed to the town of Fountain Hills is $654,943.56. Let me repeat it. $654,943.56 of uncollected fees for the past 5 years in the court system. I don't blame the courts, our personal courts, for not being able to collect those fees because they don't have the manpower to do it. So I propose for my fellow council members that we hire, under the auspice of the Marshalltown Ordinance, a court collections officer. This court collection officer would work less than 30 hours a week, therefore we would not be have to pay benefits. The average going rate that I've researched is $25 an hour for an AZ post-certified officer. That's someone that could be retired less than 5 years, who still has AZ post-certification and the power to arrest. What do we do by this? This gives the judge in our courtroom the ability to swear out arrest warrants for people who have not paid their fees. Of the $654,000 total, actual cash that the town would receive, because it's a shared revenue source, is $285,904.55. $285,904.55. That's a significant amount of money, folks. That's an alley paving, that's some playground. It's a lot of money that we're leaving on the table. And we as a council have the authority under the town ordinance to appoint this person to this position. And let me tell you, when you have an arrest warrant out for you and you owe $700, you'll call every relative in the world to get that $700 so you don't wind up in jail. The only additional cost would be a database that this court services officer would need. It's called LexisNexis, and it's a charge of $100 a month. And finally, I think it's something else we can all agree upon. We saw this proposed new and modified fee schedule. Let's collect the fees fair and square. Let's not pick and choose who we collect the fees from. If people use the park or the town facilities as a revenue generator, then the fees that the town are owed should be paid. So I think we can all agree on that. Some of these events that we have bring a huge amount of people. What I heard resoundingly in these emails and from people that I met is, you know, what do the town residents shoulder this burden, but what about the visitors? What can we get from the visitors? Well, the money that's put in from these fairs, we need to collect the fees, so it's across the board fair. Nonprofits in this place or in this town are paying the fee, and they're donating all the money, and then people that are using our facilities as a revenue source are not paying. So let's make it fair for everybody. I yield my time.
Thank you, Councilman. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. This is fun meeting.
You're a sadist.
You know, Alan, you hit it on the head when you said we haven't been creative enough. Wait, let me quote you a couple of times tonight. One of them you actually said, Alan voted, you said that we need to spend money on studies. And the fees we pay right now for all these miscellaneous little studies to increase the revenues and create the environment for businesses to succeed in this town, I am all for. You know, you brought up that lagoon study. Grady, clarify how much that's cost and how that came to fruition, number one.
So it was two different components. It was one to look at the feasibility study, and we also had,
Which was how much?
I believe it was about 20,000.
17.5, I believe it was.
And then the other part was about roughly 20,000.
Right.
And so
Which
combined, it
was
was
the
about
Schwabach-
38,000.
Which was the Schwabach plan for the design downtown, which was in line with the downtown strategic plan, which the entire concept, which, listen, you can debate me on this. I came up with an idea, a concept to bring revenues to this town, to try to fill the vacancies and to bring people downtown. That was the objective. The objective is, and you can say, and you can throw out this $40 million creates $1 million in tax revenues. There are so many additional fees and so much business success that are added to the collection rate of the town. So that in itself, we'd need a financial planner, an analyst to look at, and you can look at the study. But my point is this. Councilman Spellich, you said someone emailed you and said, think like a businessman, whatever, right? Okay. When you say selling a property in Fountain Hills is a one-time fee, and that doesn't make any sense, that's not true. If we looked at the Shea property, for instance, and we looked at creating the environment for an investor to come in and build a multifamily complex down there, you can have 40, 50 units down there, maybe even more on that 8-acre parcel. How do we collect revenues? Rental taxes is a big component to the fees that we collect as a town. In addition to the fact, if you were able to put an extra 1,000 to 2,000 people down in the Shea area, that Target Plaza might actually attract more people and might actually attract businesses that want to invest in our community. So it's a snowball effect. It's one thing leads to another. And if we make the right decisions and create the environment for success for businesses, other opportunities will flow. So I don't want to discount any ideas here. That's not what this is about tonight. It's not about saying you're wrong or you saying I'm wrong. I'm against an additional tax on the residents of this community. I am interested in figuring out ways legally that we have been asking, and I understand we saved a lot of money on legal fees in the last couple of years. So you want to talk about where we saved money? You know, maybe we spent $17,000 on a study to try to create the environment. We saved a hell of a lot of money in other areas, but that's besides the point. But we've asked other town attorneys, and understand you've now come in, for legal opinions on a lot of things. We still haven't gotten the answers. So this is 2 years in the making, and I know you're working on things, and I'm not calling you out, okay?
Okay, so Grady's at least saying that Mitesh did look at some of these items. I will say that with respect to several of these items, I'll defer to him as to what's been done. Many of these, in fact, all of them,
That's right.
I'm only hearing of some of them for the.
So the
So-
expense of the vacancies and charging a fee on vacant commercial properties that the tenants have left vacant in a dark clause in the lease for years, that we're sitting here as a community with vacant buildings that they're collecting a fee on, but there's no commerce happening, which is affecting us negatively. What can we do to solve that? That's one.
Sure.
The other question, second homes in Fountain Hills, that the that people are second homeowners, but they're not registered in Arizona, and essentially, they're really not contributing to the ongoing needs of our community based on the structure that we have right now. Is there anything that we could do to have a fee such as this fee that Councilman Spellich is discussing? I'd be all in favor of that fee for residents that are not living here full-time, because it'd be fair. We talk about a fair fee, that's fair. You own multiple properties, and this is an investment property for you, a vacation home, and you're not contributing, that's kind of fair to me. So those are the type of things that I'm interested in looking into, to think of other ways to raise revenue.
Mayor?
Thank you.
Like-
Just one second. I just wanted to ask Aaron one thing, because Vice Mayor mentioned the property over by Shea, and I thought that we had established that we weren't unable to do anything with that property. Is that not true, or because it has stipulations attached to it that prevent us from doing some of the things you're talking about?
Won't say that.
But we still don't know that quite. I mean, I've seen it, so I've seen that it has a deed restriction, but that's, all I've done is read it and see that it says we can't.
Yeah, we went ahead, based on council direction, we went ahead and obtained an appraisal, and I believe we just got it 2 days ago. So I think that would be something, at some point, the council may want to discuss with legal about and what they want to do. And
The point being, though, what can we do with it, despite whatever the appraisal is, which is something we'd probably talk about in executive session? Is there indeed a deed restriction on that property?
I don't believe there was on that.
Okay.
It will show up in the report, though.
All right.
That was a pure land swap, is what I understand with MCO.
Okay,
And so.
but it does say that on the deed, so we'd really have to figure that out.
So, Mayor, to my point, these are the types of circle conversations that we've been having for years.
Yeah, I don't know about years, but I know,
Well,
since our
couple-
retreat.
Couple of years that I've been on
I'd
this
like
council.
to ask council a couple of questions following up on Councilman Tollis's ideas. Can we, under state law, tell second homeowners, snowbirds, that they have to pay any kind of a fee?
Yeah, so my main thought on that one, I already have a thought on that one, that the answer is no, under the Equal Protection Clause, 14th Amendment.
So the answer is no.
That's my initial
Okay.
reaction.
Next question. We have vacant storefronts.
If,
Sorry, I
Can
didn't
you
mean-
can finish your thought?
I didn't mean
you
to
know,
interrupt.
I hate providing off-the-cuff legal advice. And I'll look to Councilwoman LaCrone to give me a nod on that, if she will. The reason is, one, I don't want to violate attorney-client, look, these conversations can be privileged. To the extent we can have them in a privileged setting, let's have them in a privileged setting. That would be my recommendation, and I am more than happy to follow through with items that frankly, I'm hearing of for the first time. Admittedly, the Shea one, we've talked about that before, Mayor, and I appreciate that. Some of these other ones are the first time that I'm hearing of them personally. So I have followed through on issues and will follow through on the issues that I'm hearing of now. I'd prefer that we give legal advice and direction in a privileged setting so that we can maintain that privilege.
And I would ask that we do that, and I want to ask also that we talk in executive session about whether or not there's any legality, under state law, to charge store owners, where the stores are vacant, any kind of a fee. I think I know the answer, but perhaps we should discuss it in executive session.
Sure. At this point, I'm not aware of one, but I can provide advice as to that in executive session.
So I just want to kind of circle back a little bit. We're talking about some more immediate needs, right? It does not to take away from anything that the vice mayor or anybody thinks about future development or things that we can do or things that we may get answered in executive session of steps we can take. Right now, you said what is the shortfall? The shortfall is on whatever this page is, 44. So next year it's 236,000. The year after it's 748,000. Up until 2023, it's over $2 million. So that's what we're looking at without raising any services, hiring new people, doing anything. So it's, even though it's difficult, we separate that out from the roads and from those things that we think that we need or know that we need, painting buildings, vehicles, and look at that and say, and that's not adding anything, and it's a shortfall. So what do we want to do right now that we can do that will at least mitigate that as much as possible? Is it going to be $2 million a year? I don't think so, but so if we raised the sales tax, that's something we can do. That's something we are possibly will not be able to do in the future due to some of the other efforts that have come out of the legislature and in other ways. So if we can do that, that's, if that's $1 million a year, that's a pretty good chunk of that particular aspect of it. We talk about the fees. Councilman Spellich, you mentioned these uncollected items, right? So that's thinking out of the box. That's looking at what we haven't necessarily known about in the past, $286,000. Maybe we do look at hiring somebody that can take care of that, but it also points out the problem with the environmental fee times 10, which is the infrastructure fee. So if we have 90% people that won't pay $3 a month, what do we think will happen when it's $350 a year plus $100 maybe for the public safety fee? We don't have a good method of collecting it, and we don't have a good method of enforcing it. So that's part of my problem, in addition to I think it's just too much money to ask an individual for at this time. That would be, $450 next year. The environmental fee, now that this isn't meaning it's happening, but if we raised that to $5 a month instead, we'd be right bumping up against covering all of those, that 800 and whatever it was, $1,000. And they're not promising anything, but if we would be able to piggyback that onto a sanitary district bill, then we could pay them for their administration, but it wouldn't be the $50,000 that we're paying. And if we could possibly negotiate with them, it's a door that's open, but not a lot. That's a relevant charge to go to sanitary district, water, stormwater, keeping the the drains clean and that kind of thing. If we move to this any other kind of fee, we have to really take that into consideration because we would never piggyback that onto anything. So I'm just throwing these things out because I'm really happy that we're able to have this discussion, and what it proves is that we're all recognizing the need to one level or another. Councilman?
I will, for the sake of discussion and for whatever we're going to propose, go along with a 4.4 million shortfall. I think it's a lot bigger than that because of what I raised at the beginning of the meeting, which is all the infrastructure needs that we can't do. But let's accept 4.4 million. To Councilman Spellich, first of all, I'm all in with what you proposed. I think those are great ideas. But when I add up the money I added up to about $412,000.
I know, chicken feed.
Pardon me?
You're gonna say small change?
No, I'm not at all.
Oh, okay,
Not at all. Let me speak for myself.
okay.
It adds up to about $412,000, which is money we should try to collect, but it doesn't get us close. If we wait to get that money, we have a problem with our budgeting, and it doesn't get us close to what we need. Having said that, I'm going to try to put the train on the tracks. I'm going to move to increase the sales tax by 0.4%.
I'll second that.
Mayor,
Yes, Vice Mayor.
I think Alan, Councilman Magazine had brought up some kind of substantive motion one time, right? After a motion was on the floor? Substitute motion?
That's right.
I would like to, for the sake of discussion, move with a substitute motion that we eliminate some of these CIP projects that we had discussed at the beginning of this meeting, and the next time we ever have a meeting like this, we're going to discuss the shortfalls before we talk about all of these niceties in regards to what we are going to invest in for the community. I've added up almost $1 million of CIP funds. If we can not do those projects and keep that money in our general fund for expenditures, that's what I would want to do.
Well, first, I just want to mention, though, that that's not general fund money, but also I don't understand the mechanisms of what we're doing here.
Okay, so because we had that issue
Point
at
of
the
order.
December 18,
Point of
20,
order.
sorry?
Point of order. We have a motion on the floor.
Well, we had a motion already on the floor.
It's a substitute motion, so you need to see if there's a second to the substitute.
And my motion, to clarify, is to, I make a motion that we discuss the CIP projects and determine whether there's any additional cuts that we can make to eliminate, to reduce these shortfalls in these budget projections.
Is there a second? Okay, so we're back to the motion. Is there discussion on the motion to raise the sales? What?
I think you want that.
Okay, yes, sir.
There being only one motion now on the floor, my point is moved.
Okay. Councilman?
Yeah, I just wanted to add some more discussion on this. I mean, Mary brought up some good points as far as the immediate needs and the long-term needs, and I think a lot of the Vice Mayor's suggestions are long-term outlooks in terms of, getting legal opinions, maybe have to change state laws. It's kind of a long-term picture as far as the revenues, so I think we do need to look at some more immediate things, and just glancing at the pavement report that, the previous council was handed, I mean, our average street condition is rated at 60, and that's the lower end of good, okay? And there's two categories above that, very good and excellent. And the study recommended we strive for a PCI of 85, which is, of course, the high end of very good. Now, we don't have to do that, but 54% of our streets right now are fair to marginal. So we're spending roughly $2.5 million a year toward our streets. The study said we need to spend $3.6 million just to keep our streets where they are. And again, 54% of them are fair to marginal. So they recommended spending $6 million a year to try to bump up our streets above this fair to marginal measure. So to me, and I agree with your idea earlier about the bonding. I mean, I think we were looking at mill and overlay projects, more capital-related projects, street-related, that people could vote on, say next year or what have you. I would be in favor of that, and that would reduce the money we need to, plow into those projects from, say, the operating fund or from the HERF. So it just frees up more money, and I just think it just addresses, the 4.4 million shortfall plus the additional millions recommended for our streets. I mean, there's, you know, and then 14% for the sheriff contract. I mean, to me, there's this doesn't seem to end in terms of the needs, and then they're not really wants, these are needs.
Councilwoman.
All right, so I think we all agree we need more revenue, obviously. It's a multifaceted solution. You've just proposed a motion that is one part of a solution, right? But I thought tonight we were here to discuss, and now we're going to take a vote on doing something. And I guess I understood you to say earlier that no one from the public can speak tonight until the end. Is that what you're saying? So we're not going to really hear from members of the public on this sales tax increase, and we're ready to vote on it. Is that my understanding of where we are right now? And we're voting on a 0.4, not a 0.3, which was recommended. I know that, is this what's going?
I was just going to say, tonight is we're really trying to get this, some clear direction on from the council.
All right,
So
so the vote
if-
is just to direct you that this is a
Yes,
great idea.
and so
Okay.
so these will really be implemented as part of the
All right,
budget
well,
process. So it means when
Thank
you.
goodness.
Yeah,
Because I didn't know
so
what the heck.
we wouldn't, we would not have done it that way
All right,
without
but again,
public
I'm-
input.
I'm kind of back to saying this. This is a multifaceted solution, right? There are many things we have to look at. Some are on the table tonight, some are not on the table tonight. And I agree that action should be taken, and you're saying that Groundhog Day, we shouldn't have Groundhog Day anymore, or as long, we need to take some action. But I think also not hastily, and get everything on the table that we can consider. I'm in favor of some of this, I'm not in favor of some of the other things. I agree that we have fees that we need to chase because it's money that's sitting on the table that we're not using. I agree with probably hiring someone to help chase them. Now, one thing I do want to say to Councilman Spellich is, let's not scare residents. I'm not even sure we can arrest them for not paying fees. There's a lot of rules to debt collection. But I think that we have a lot more to discuss, you know? I'm listening to everything. There's great ideas on the table, and eventually we are going to have to take action, probably sooner rather than later. I think it's going to take more discussing, in my opinion.
The reason I made the motion is that I'm presuming, and maybe incorrectly, that the council is going to want to raise the sales tax. And it's only going to raise $1.2 million or $1.3 million. So clearly we have to go beyond that. But I think Councilman LaCrone makes a valid point. Perhaps we should discuss all of them together as a package. So I will withdraw my motion.
Is that good? Yeah. Thank you. One of the things about the sales tax I want to mention as we're discussing that is that if we did raise it by the 0.3 and got to 2.9, there's, and to the vice mayor's point, if you look at the surrounding towns, we're now in the valley 11th, and moving to 2.9 would make us 9th. Moving to 3 would tie us for 3rd. So just looking around competition-wise, 2.9 moves us up 2 spaces, but moving it up to 3 would move us up to 4th. Just overall, some of the discussions about, here it sounds like we're like all of these things that we want to do, but it also is not something that happened in one day. We had tools that were at our, that we were able to use in the past to try to either stop spending or to gain revenue. Now, the legislature has, over many, like 20 years, there's just been ways where it's eroded what we're able to get. The HERF funds are the biggest ones. I mean, if you look at when that started in 2004 or whatever, with them cutting that off, the very thing that we need the most, roads, those have been cut. We had the legislature balancing their budget for several years. In a way, like with the DWR, that was that 1 year, the Department of Water Resources charged all the cities. We have the Department of Revenue now taking something off the top. So that, in addition to this fairness factor that we're talking about, has been removed from our ability to have a conversation to base anything that we want to do, except a property tax, on ability to pay or on people that don't live here. So we just have so many things that we can do. And in addition to the other ones that, like the Vice Mayor was saying, that we would go forward, we'll look at some longer terms things. Just about the sales tax, though, I'd rather, if we're going to pursue it, kind of keep it to the 2.9. And again, you know, my feelings about how we would go about collecting if we did go with any kind of a larger fee, and my concern with that amount, for sure. So what would you think, as we go forward, that you need from us to come back with something that we actually be able to vote on? Or, you know, again, discuss, obviously, but...
Well, we're up against some timeframes, as we mentioned earlier at the beginning of the meeting. I think Craig, we would probably want to either do one of two things, and you're probably going to all tar and feather me tonight, but we'd probably want to get you guys just at a meeting, sit you down, and get you to actually take some action. And I realized tonight wasn't really the venue for that. It was the discussion. I think this was probably one of the best discussions that we've had in a long time on revenue options. And seriously, I mean, I know we went through almost 2 years before the council arrived at the primary property tax, but the staff and I would have been just as pleased if you had all these other options that you talked about tonight, because I think they're really getting at the heart of the issue, and that is trying to get at sustainable revenues. So I think the option might be is we might have to come back to another meeting. And I know you're probably not wanting another meeting, but we might have to do maybe just a special meeting on this topic alone. And we would have it agendized so that the public could go ahead and have the ability to speak on it.
I think we'd have to have an executive session first to address Councilman Tollis's ideas that council's going to look at.
That part, for sure.
One thing I want to mention is that in this discussion, since the actual item was revenue, don't think that means that we're not looking at expenditures. And some of the things that have happened recently, we've had some staffing turnover, great people that are going to be doing other things, but one of the things I'm trying to look at it as is opportunity. So we have some opportunities here to maybe do some things differently and not be Groundhog Day or whatever, and however you want to look at it. So I think that along with other expenditure options are there, but we're beyond, I think we agree that we're beyond that is going to be enough to help us get over what we need to do here. Vice Mayor.
Mayor, thank you. And I'd like to have some real numbers the next time we come back for another discussion. And I'd like those numbers to be based off of many of the discussions that we've had in the last 2 years of the retreats. And looking at the commercial properties in town, determining whether or not they're the highest and best use right now, what we can look at. Maybe we can bring in a commercial real estate agent to give his perspective. Zentar's Grounds with MCO, very knowledgeable about this community and all of the properties. Let's determine, we talked about having second floor residential properties on commercial property areas. Let's look at all of that and really look at the numbers as to what we can do. Now, I understand, and Councilman Spellich had made a reference to Councilman Magazine, small potatoes or whatever, but they all add up. So we need to be looking at everything, and Councilman LeCrone, same thing. It's multifaceted. It's not just one, we're going to raise the sales tax. That's not the answer. The answer is we have to look at all of these things we've talked about for 2 years, and I apologize for continuing to harp on that, but it is true. There are a number of things we've talked about that we've asked for, hey, what could this do? What is one way we can address this commercial properties that are dormant in this town? We've got to come up with strategies. Now we lost Scott Cooper. Big loss, right? So now what are we going to do? We need to bring somebody in or expertise on, the problem is not being solved. So I hope we can solve it. And I would like to have our finance director show us other options.
Mayor, I just want to suggest to Councilman Tallis, if I could, that to avoid this discussion all over again, perhaps you could put down in writing the questions that you want staff to answer in terms of amounts and so on. You've raised a number of them. I think it'd be helpful rather than just, going through the discussion all over again.
Yeah, Grady, we can look at the minutes from the last two retreats, and we can look at them in detail, because the questions have been asked.
Councilman?
No, again, I don't think anyone's discounting any of the suggestions or ideas espoused tonight. But again, I think we have to look at the upcoming budget discussions, fiscal year 1920, next couple of years, and then you have the bigger picture, the longer picture in terms of the, doing business things and certain fees that we don't even know if we can do. That's a longer term thing that we're not going to get the answers to in 4 weeks if you haven't gotten them in 2 years. So
We get a good, much better attorney now. We probably will.
I just think we need to separate those things, in terms of our focus, and it is a myriad of things to look at, but I think we need to look at immediate, short-term needs and the longer-term picture.
Thank you. I would agree with that, because I think we have what we know as immediate things to look at. What you're talking about, and with Scott and leaving and the other, is part of what I was talking about with the staffing, and there's been some kind of neat discussions happening, but again, that's kind of like economic development and tourism and visitors and all of those good things. So if, you could stand to separate it long enough so that we could do something more immediate, because I do think that we need to do that. I think we need to take some action before we're able to have any kind of a fruitful study of if we were successful with some of our economic development. That would be years down the road probably, or, you know what I mean? So I don't want that to stop us from moving ahead with a revenue meeting, because I think that's a lot longer term. It's going to need a lot more work. So, what do you guys, you all right then? You want to just wrap it up? We'll hear from speaker cards and, okay.
Mayor, if I might, the one thing that I need some direction on is whether it would be appropriate to reallocate the VLT to balance the current year budget.
Oh, well, the reason I'm okay with that, Mike, is because we're free to do whatever we want with it. So if we want to put it in roads, we still could. What do you think? With the diversion? You okay?
Sounds like you have to.
Well, that's true, yeah.
That's the short-term answer, right?
Oh, no,
He has to.
I get it, yeah, all right, thanks. All right, well, I know it's late, but if any of you folks are still here that would like to speak, and knowing that it will go towards our next discussion, you're certainly welcome to. Yes, sir.
Hello, I'm Bob Shellstrom from Fountain Hills, and thank you for this opportunity. I hope none of you have heart conditions, because I'm going to tell you, in the capital portion, I completely agreed with what you were doing. You asked the same questions I would have asked, and I have nothing to criticize, except I looked at the project for the fire station, and there's some major issues there with the spacing, the siting, which I believe you're working on. There's got to be a lot more talk before you move forward with that, and I think you were very wise to defer it. That being said, I was looking at this and listening to the revenue issues, and where I take a look at these projections For expenditures, I really only have 2 questions. Prove it. When you guys did the contract with the fire department, one of the first things I put in a FOIA for was I wanted to see the bid evaluation. I've done one of these for clients before. You go through, you look at benchmarking, is this cost to us consistent with other communities are paying per FTE? You take a look at, because it's really like a loan servant kind of deal that we have there, what is their multiplier? What is their overhead cost? What is their profit on every dollar taken on that multiplier? It's been my experience, you probably should be paying about 1.9 when they're using our facilities. I was looking for some analysis of that showed, hey, this is the right price. I could find no documentation. I got a response, no such document exists. Hopefully this council is better than that. That's a real problem. One thing I noted looking at the contract, and please correct me if I interpreted it incorrectly, if the council is in distress financially, you can reopen that contract. The question is to figure out now, are you paying a fair price based on profit and everything else? If you can make a case that it isn't through doing what would normally be done through a bid evaluation, I think you got to go back to the table. We're talking a lot of money here. Just some preliminary numbers I looked at showed that per full-time equivalent, we're paying about $130,000. It looks like Scottsdale, who had rural at one time and now is doing it on their own, is about $106,000. Can I guarantee you that's an accurate number? It's a rough number. That's why when I saw Manager Grady's $450,000 at the retreat difference, I said, what's the name of that document? I want to see it. And I was told, well, we haven't quite got a document on that yet. So really we shouldn't be putting out that number until we can back it up. But there's an opportunity there. We probably should be paying less than we are from what I've seen. But once again, prove it that that's the right number. 62% from what I heard tonight is contracted services. We might have a real issue there. I've looked at 3 projects so far, the station number 2, our street sweeping situation, and what was the other one? Well, some of the roads, of course, and the Fountain Hills project. What we had there on Fountain Hills is the project was supposed to be worth $500,000, and we paid $364,000 higher than that. We had an $8.5 million contract going for Mr. Tanner that was pulled from the last schedule. So that's gone now. But the bottom line is, why didn't we tell them to bid? Briefly, productivity is an issue. From the street sweeper, we showed that they had about 1,800 man-hours that they were figuring it was going to take for us, and that was the basis for their number at double the rate of Mesa. We had 3 people working full-time and some part-time on that for 5,400 hours prior to this change. Was that an isolated incident, or is there other places like that for savings? Until you can authoritatively say that, we can't say we don't have the money and we need taxes. I thank you for your patience on letting it go longer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi.
So thank you for a few minutes here. I had a lot of questions coming in, and some of them were answered, and it created more questions too, but let me kind of limit my comments to a couple of items. In the packet, in the PowerPoint here, there was a statement on page 41 of the total packet in the summary of financial challenges, which bothered me when I read it. I'll quote, "The structural issue is more of a revenue problem than an expenditure problem." To me, and I think to many people in town, that indicates or suggests that you're not worried about expenditures. Expenditures are always important. To individual people, to families, expenditures are important, and some of the comments reinforce that, but I want to emphasize that it is always an expenditure problem. There may be a revenue issue too, but it's always an expenditure problem, and a lot of these capital improvement projects I look at and say, like, what the are you thinking, okay? They're wishes, they are not necessities. The town is supposed to take care of the necessities, public safety, proper roads and stuff. Some of these other things are really ridiculous without going through them one by one. Another statement was in there, in the summary of financial challenges. Again, quote, "At the time, the council believed the primary property tax was the most equitable method to address the revenue shortfall. Unfortunately, the ballot measure failed. Now, I'm under the impression that town-produced reports of this type were supposed to remain objective. Seems to me the word unfortunately is not exactly objective, and it kind of feeds in, as many of you know, I was very active in the effort to defeat successfully the property tax proposal last year, and in talking to literally hundreds of people, the perception out there, and maybe not based in reality, but the perception was that the town had spent a lot of money on things that had very little justification, and that not enough effort was put into really explaining why this money was needed. And even now, the shortfall for next year, I think I heard, was $200 and some thousand. What Councilman Spellich proposed, to collect fees that are already assessed, would cover that shortfall next year. And I hope that is going to be pursued, because it seems like, I don't know if it's easy money, but it's money that's already been assessed and has not been collected. It would cover next year's shortfall. Not that we shouldn't look further in the future, but again, it would solve the issue for at least a year while these other things are looked at. But again, perceptions. You need to realize expenditures are important, sure, revenue is important, but explain clearly to people in town why you want more of their money. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Good evening, I promise I'll be short. Roger Watton, 10809 North Sonora Vista in Fountain Hills. My wife and I own our property here. We are, and good thing I had thick skin, we are part-timers though. But I can assure you that it concerns me as part-timer, maybe sometime a full-timer, in Fountain Hills, of the decline in the streets and some of the infrastructure that I see in town. I'm all for some increase in sales tax. I'm not big on the various fees, because apparently you can't attach a lien to the property if those fees aren't paid. So I gladly paid my environmental fee, and I guess if you folks decide that the infrastructure or whatever fee, I will pay it, but there will be a lot that don't. And so I highly encourage you, whenever your skin is thick enough again, to go back after the property tax. I would gladly, and supported it last year for the time that we were here. We weren't here when it was actually voted on. And I can't vote, so it's the full-timers that voted it down, not us part-timers, at least unless you're permanent residents of Arizona and legal residents, which I'm not, my wife isn't. So I personally felt that the amount that you went after, or at least the prior council, was maybe too much. And maybe if you'd have gone for half of that, and with a little better education and communication, maybe you'll have a chance of passing it, because I believe that's the long-term solution for Fountain Hills and the revenue issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything for the good of the order?
For the good of the order.
I'll have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
This was fun.